Good morning, and welcome to the 15th meeting of the Special Commission on Combating Antisemitism. My name is Simon Cataldo. I have the honor of chairing this meeting today. We are going to begin with a roll call. Anna, could you take that away, please?
Jeremy Burton.
Here.
Jody Kipnis.
Here.
Representative Simon Cataldo.
Present.
Peggy Shakur. Here. Robert Lycan.
Here.
Representative Stephen Howard.
Yes.
Rita Blanter.
Here.
David Friedman.
Here.
Dara Kaufman.
Here.
Jill Hyde. Here. Ruth Ann Fuller.
Here.
Jamie Hoa. Michael Memolo.
Here.
Aaron Hashimoto Martel. Here. DA Paul Tucker.
Here.
Chief Thomas Fowler.
Present.
And confirming that Aaron Polanski, Dina Papanikolaou, and Senator John Velas are not present.
Thank you, Anna. Seeing as we have a quorum, the next item on our agenda is approving the meeting minutes from November 5th, 2025. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes for our previous meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Kaufman and Representative Howard. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, the motion is approved. The minutes from our meeting are approved. And, all right, sounds like we're resolving our little audio issue. Thanks everyone so much for being here, members of the public. Thank you, commissioners, for your continued excellent attendance. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. So our next meeting is on November 20th. At that meeting, we will be discussing our draft master report and recommendations, which we will be voting on at that meeting. Today, probably during this meeting at some point, Matt Cooper will be circulating the latest iteration of the draft report, which includes many, many changes that were discussed at the last hearing and sent to the chairs from members of the public, from commissioners. You will notice as you read that, there's going to be both a redline version and a clean version. The redline version is going to, at first blush, probably overstate the extent of the changes because it's going to include things that are moved. You should also note that when you're looking for your changes, they may not be exactly where you suggested that they be inserted, but they may still be inserted. And some of the changes are combinations of very similar changes that were suggested by members of the public and commissioners, or multiple commissioners or multiple members of the public. So just want to put you on alert for that. It is my plan on Monday to circulate another red line that combines the chair's recommendations of incorporating what is offered at this meeting. And my plan, depending on what those changes are, the nature and extent of them, is to start our discussion with an omnibus motion to accept all of those changes that are from this meeting. Now that could change based on the nature of what those changes are, but those changes will be reflected, or at least it's my plan for those changes to be reflected in a draft that's recirculated on Monday. And again, that would only include what was offered from today. And then we can move on. So the way that we will make changes to the draft that is circulated today is going to be just like last time. It's going to be by motion. So you should bring with you, if you have further changes to the already significantly revised document you're going to receive today, if you have further changes to that document, it will need to happen by motion. It's not going to be incorporated into a further draft. you should send those. You have options. You can send those to Mac Cooper, and he'll do his best to figure out kind of how to display those. We recommend that you bring a laptop with you, just so that you can better see what's going to be shown to the public, right? So we're not going to be sending out different documents that only the commissioners have, but if you have your laptop with you and you're logged in, you can have that right in front of you for the screen share of what's available to the public. You don't have to send something ahead of time though. If it's a Word or something really simple, Mac can do it online in real time, and we can vote on it that way. This worked quite well last time, I think, and people were able to follow along, and we were able to make changes. If you have to leave early, please let me know. I already know of a couple of people who either may not be able to be there or may have to leave before we reach a vote. And we will work, as we did last time, to ensure that anybody who cannot physically be here or remotely be here, so remote is not an issue. If you're virtual, you can just vote virtually. But if you're not present in the meeting, we will make sure that there are accommodations to ensure that your vote is recorded, because the final, just like last time, it will be a roll call vote, and the final vote will be recorded in the final report. We're not going to have a discussion on that. There may be questions. We're going to handle those elsewhere. We're going to go right into our meeting at this point, and I'm just checking to make sure I covered everything from that. Yes, all right. So we're going to welcome up our first panel today, which is Parents for Peace: Why Antisemitism is Not Just a Jewish Problem. Folks from Parents for Peace, you can come right up. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for communicating with Matt Cooper. As you know, and I'll may or may not need to remind folks in future panels today, we have a stacked group of visitors, so we are going to have to stay within our time limits. We're so grateful that you're here, and you can take it away. Just please start by briefly introducing yourselves as you go along in the order that you see fit.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having us. My name is Miriam Nadri Churchill, and I am really honored to speak on behalf of Parents for Peace. I am the Executive Director of Parents for Peace, a nonprofit organization founded by families who have lost loved ones to extremism and anti-Semitism. For 10 years, we have dedicated ourselves to one mission: helping prevent others from experiencing that same loss. Our work comes from a deep personal pain. We have witnessed too many families devastated by radicalization, watching someone they love to fall into the grip of hate. But out of that pain, we have built hope, but mainly services to interrupt the cycle of hate and anti-Semitism. In fact, we see extremism and anti-Semitism not just a security issue, but a public health crisis, one that can be understood, treated, and prevented. In fact, for the past 10 years, we have pulled hundreds of people out of hate. We work across ideologies, meaning from white supremacy to Islamism to far left, Antifa, 764 for those that are aware, and many other ideologies. Many of the young people who become radicalized share certain struggles: anxiety, loneliness, social isolation, and a sense of grievances. And grievances, whether it's a true grievance or perceived one. They often feel like victims in the world that doesn't see or value them. Victimhood is one of the components of being radicalized. Some have clinical diagnoses, such as depression, autism, or severe ADHD, that make them even more vulnerable to manipulation. And extremists know how to exploit that vulnerability. It's extremely important for everybody to understand that. We have worked with cases as young as 12 years old here in Massachusetts, which is devastating, all the way through early adulthood. When a young person is groomed by extremist group, and sometimes, please hear that, by authority figures, people that they trust. It's a form of child exploitation. This issue is very personal to me and for many people who still remember the Boston Marathon bombing. My children were young, and as a mother, I was overwhelmed by not only fear, but by the devastating reality that two young people, once described as good kids by their teachers in Cambridge, had become so radicalized by hate and anti-Semitism that they could destroy lives and shatter the heart of our city. That moment left me obsessed with understanding why and how young people are indoctrinated into extremism and anti-Semitism. My colleague here, Arno and Mubin, and myself, and our team, decided to build Parents for Peace so we can prevent innocent lives and prevent hate before it takes root. So over 10 years, our team have learned that the cost of radicalization and anti-Semitism are not limited to Jewish families. And most of people don't understand that. They ripple out, damaging every part of our community. Families, schools, public events, even defining moments like the Boston Marathon. Anti-Semitism, and hear that, is the tip of the iceberg, a gateway to wider extremism that erodes the safety, unity, and well-being of all. We see this in our work with law enforcement, with schools, colleges, and public health. We see it in the hurt of families, Jewish and non-Jewish equally, who have lost loved ones to hate. When anti-Semitism festers, broader violence often follows. No one is immune, and we have hundreds of cases to show it. This is why our response must be proactive and comprehensive. Our recent pilot training at Ashland High School here in Massachusetts showed the very real impact of supporting teachers and staff to recognize early warning signs and creating nurturing, inclusive environments, but we cannot stop here. So I urge the committee to include funding in Massachusetts state budget for comprehensive education and training across 3 sectors. First, training for K-12 schools in line with this commission's own recommendation. So every educator has the tools to build resilience and prevent hate. Second, dedicated training for healthcare professionals, echoing the critical testimony from the American Jewish Medical Association. And third, standardized training for law enforcement, an effort where Parents for Peace stands ready to partner with Chief James Hicks and the Municipal Police Training Committee, as discussed in last month's hearing. And importantly, all of this must explicitly include the full scope of anti-Semitism and its role as a gateway to hate-based violence extremism. If Massachusetts leads in prevention, we can change the trajectory for countless children and families, ensuring that no one is left to suffer the consequences of unchecked hate. Let's equip our teachers, healthcare workers, and local police with the understanding, compassion, and skills required to keep every community safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that was great. Thank you. I do just want to give a time check because, and I want to do it as diplomatically as possible. I'm not taking up the time I'm talking now, but we are at 10:14. We just have because it's Shabbat, we've got a bunch of people we got to get to where they have to go to. So just want to.
So we have, what did you say, 10 minutes total? 7 minutes?
It's 15 minutes per panel. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
You got 10 left?
I'll be very quick then.
Take your 5.
You have 7 left according to that. Yeah.
Great. Shalom Aleichem.
And we are going to ask
Alaikum.
questions too.
Yes. Shalom Aleichem. Salamu Alaikum. Peace be upon you. My name is Mubin Sheikh. I'm an interventionist at Parents for Peace, doing the one-on-one interventions with radicalized young people. I'm also joining you here as a Muslim in support of my Jewish and Christian brothers and sisters who are impacted by this hate. And I'm supporting those communities because they supported me when it was our turn. Very quickly, I just came back from filming yesterday. It's a CBS story that you'll see it, about a young kid, 15 years old, from a family, African-American Christian family. Lovely, lovely family, tolerant, loving of their kid. But after October 7, got caught up in the hysteria of Jew hate and verbalized a threat to a student at his school. He said he wanted to stab the fat Jewish kid in the head. Then he escalated further and wanted to develop plans to attack a synagogue. And this basically, everything came crashing down for this family. Suddenly, the FBI were involved. The school got involved. He was expelled from the school. They saw his search results using a school computer. He looked up every conceivable blacklisted terrorist term you could think of. You know, where does a family like this turn? Who do they talk to? Who helps the family through all the different stages of deciding what are we supposed to do in this kind of situation? You know, we talk about foreign wars and the concerns about foreign wars coming to domestic shores. But now these foreign wars, quote unquote, are invading the homes of residents through phone and computer screens. Who is defending the children at home who are being invaded by real predators? When we talk about this topic, this is not just people have, you know, controversies over what terms to use because of wars that are happening. We are dealing with real predators who are targeting children in the most horrific and horrendous ways. This is well beyond rhetoric and an academic thing of discussion. This is a very real threat that people are facing in their homes. So on behalf of Parents for Peace, I thank the commission and the honorable members that are part of the commission. And I, of course, reinforce everything that my colleague Miriam was saying about the supports that schools need, that parents need, and Parents for Peace is ready to assist. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Arno Michaelis. I'm an exit peer specialist at Parents for Peace. I draw upon my lived experience as a organizer of neo-Nazi skinhead hate groups from 1987 to 1994 to help lead children and adults who are also falling under the influence of white nationalist hatred to a better place. I spent 7 years of my life as a white nationalist. It was far and away the most miserable 7 of the 55 I've lived. I tried to kill myself twice during that period. The work I do today is done with the intention of helping others avoiding making the mistakes that I've made. I want young people to know that hate is a miserable disease and it's an addiction, but fortunately it's fully preventable and fully curable. When I was a neo-Nazi in the late 1980s and early 1990s, we referred to the United States government as the Zionist occupational government. We accused Jews of genocide. We accused Jews of being colonizers and oppressors. I was absolutely stunned after October 7th to hear the exact same rhetoric that I used as a neo-Nazi 30 years ago coming from not only big-name celebrities and professors, but also from politicians and educators. It is heartbreaking to me that we have educators who are indoctrinating children in the same anti-Semitic hatred that I sought to indoctrinate kids in as a neo-Nazi skinhead in the late 80s and early 90s. The theme of this panel is that anti-Semitism hurts everyone. And as my colleague Mubin Shaikh just illustrated, families that aren't Jewish, that likely never met a Jewish person in their lives, can be completely devastated when one of their loved ones falls under the influence of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, first and foremost, harms Jewish people, and that's why, as a civil society, we all need to diminish anti-Semitism in civil society. But it's important to understand anti-Semitism also harms the anti-Semite. When you are an anti-Semite, you blame Jews for everything going wrong in your life. And you're typically predisposed to these ideologies because things are going wrong in the first place. So as you're expending all of this energy blaming Jews and hating Jews, energy that could be much better used to fix the issues that are going wrong in your life continues to spiral down the toilet, and it can become a very vicious circle that can easily lead to mass casualty violence. In the best case scenario, when it doesn't lead to mass casualty violence, you simply have an individual who is digging a miserable hole for themselves, and everyone in their family is suffering the consequences as well. So I'm incredibly grateful to all of you on this commission and for all the time and energy you've put into countering anti-Semitism in Massachusetts and setting an example for the rest of the country that's sorely needed. And we at Parents for Peace are at your disposal to pursue these efforts. Thank you so much for listening to us this morning.
Thank you. Questions from the commissioners? Representative.
Thank you all for being here. I guess my first question is for the gentleman in the center there. First of all, what drew you to become a neo-Nazi or a skinhead?
There's never a good answer for that, so don't expect it to make sense. I grew up in an alcoholic household, but I had a pretty idyllic childhood. I was predisposed to antisocial behavior, just kind of the way I'm wired. I come from a long line of alcoholism. A thing about alcoholics is they call us adrenaline junkies. We never have enough stimulation. We're always trying to create more. So as a kid, I started out as a bully on the school bus, and I always needed to escalate it because I was addicted to that behavior. I went from being a bully on the school bus to fights in the schoolyard to breaking and entering to vandalism. Started drinking when I was 14. That was gasoline on a fire. By the time I was 16, I was very acclimated to violence. I was addicted to antisocial behavior and shocking people and repulsing people, and nothing shocks people like a swastika. At least in the late 80s, that was the case.
And following up with that, as a member of the skinhead or a Nazi organization, would they allow self-loathing Jews as members?
There actually was, so you need to understand, first of all, white nationalists, and this goes for Islamists as well, they have like Judar on 24/7. Where are the Jews? Everybody's a Jew. They're only 0.02% of the population, but they're everywhere. So we were constantly like looking for Jews, and during my time in white nationalism, we found out that one of our members actually was Jewish, and he was viciously beaten and thrown out of the organization. So no, we would have not accepted a outward self-loathing Jew, but it's not unheard of for Jewish people who internalize thousands of years of anti-Semitism in the form of self-hatred.
So in other words, you don't differentiate between a Jewish person who may not like being Jewish or someone who is a conservative. In other words, a liberal versus a conservative. It doesn't really matter. As long as they're Jewish, they would be hated.
I'm going to answer that question with a quick joke. Two Jews walk into a bar. One says, "Hi, I'm a Zionist Jew." The other one says, "Hi, I'm an anti-Zionist Jew." The bartender says, "You can both leave. We don't serve Jews here."
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
First of all, thank you so much for your presentation and the incredible work that you do. The 12-year-old, the hate crime, I think I'm familiar with that. One of the things that I found as that hate crime was coming up and in speaking with our district attorney is that there were no diversion programs. When these things happen, when it rises to that level, even if it is caught as it was in our case, there's no diversion programs. And I know that you ended up being part of the solution for the diversion program. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that, if you have a set diversion program, and what we as a state could do to systemize or create so that there is a diversion program in place when these things happen, at least when it's in the K through 12 space.
Thank you very much for this very important question. In fact, Parents for Peace is the only organization in the United States that does what we do, helping family members, partnering with them, and schools to be able to prevent this kind of escalation as early as possible. And what we've done, the case that you are talking about, but also really in many other places, is that we have tried to convince schools and cities, I speak to many mayors, about, look, the investments in the work we do to partner with schools, so they can be equipped as early as possible is the solution. The investment is really minimal, when you compare with the benefits, So what we are trying to do in Massachusetts, in fact, is we have created this curriculum, and we have piloted with the Ashland School here in Massachusetts, which was successful. We did like an evaluation system, the before and after, and we can see that as simple as training staff and teachers, of the early warning sign, because they don't know, but imagine a school that is equipped. Imagine, a city, that is equipped with early sign, that we understand very well, that the teachers don't understand. Imagine how many cases, how many young people and families could be prevented to go to the path of hate. We have stories and data that shows that it works. So I would say schools need urgently to be equipped. And K-12 is important because this is when the trouble happened. We see it in colleges later. It's already too late. But the problem, and we know they are so young, it's K-12 need to have a training for the faculty so they understand, the school nurse, the teachers, all the eyeballs on the problem. We have a real crisis with young people. It's devastating. So, so I would say that this is a very practical, easy, solution, and we want to test that in Massachusetts. Just to kind of see the impact and to see what are the impact of equipping, teachers, schools, to be able to do this diversion, now which you're talking about, before it gets to court. Because often the cases come to us when it's already in the hands of the courts, judges, probation officers.
But even in those cases, and I do agree, an ounce of prevention is even better. But I'm also just from our experience, when it does get to that point, the district attorneys, the courts, they don't even know what the resources are out there to support this kind of diversion program, because you're not sending that kind of kid to juvie. That's just going to make it worse. So I'm just thinking in terms of this commission, how do we raise the awareness of those resources in the preventative side of things within the K-12 space, but also within law enforcement and the district attorneys, and because when it happened, district attorney reached out to us at
Right.
Federation.
Yep.
And thankfully, I think it was the ABL, right? Peggy, were you on that meeting? That brought Parents for Peace
Yep.
to us. But I think that more law enforcement need to know what the resources are out there.
Can I add real quickly? Diversion is a excellent opportunity to intervene. If you look at the traditional drug and alcohol addiction space, many people who are clean say, "Thank God I caught a drug charge, because that led me to a 12-step program." I think we need to change the paradigm in our society so we have the same approach to hate-based crimes. So when people, whether they're young or older, when they're in a pretrial situation and they have an opportunity to learn and grow and be accountable for their mistakes and become a better person from what happened, rather than continue down a darker path, that pretrial diversion opportunity is one that we need to seize, and it's one that Parents for Peace has done a ton of work in that space.
Commissioner Lycan, and then Chief Fowler, and we'll go right down.
First of all, thank you for the work you do. It's moving testimony you provided. I wanted to, Commissioner Kaufman anticipated part of what I wanted to ask you, but I just want to confirm your recommendations are that teachers receive training to help in recognition of problems when they arise.
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that they get training to do it, that the courts have maybe whatever mechanism are informed about the nature of the problem and resources that are available, that those are your primary recommendations at this moment. And then they'll pass it over to you. Just help us understand your understanding of the scale of this problem. Is it something that is regionally based? Is it something that happens everywhere? Do you have a sense? I mean, we're concerned about the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but do you have a sense of that?
First of all, I wish to have a good news for you. This problem is really it's a crisis. We have to call it like a mental health, a public health crisis. We work at a national level, plus Canada, and actually other countries are trying to get our attention, which is we don't have the bandwidth for. This is a real problem, and we see young people trashing their life, with hate and anti-Semitism. So this is a crisis. It's really big. Massachusetts is not doing really well because we work at national level, and Massachusetts is really one of the top state that has issues, which is really astonishing, and too bad for someone like me who is from here. To answer the other question, we have been pulled in public schools in the Boston and greater Boston area and Massachusetts. And when we are pulled, things are already bad. But even though we were able to kind of work with the school, with the family, with the kids that got into hate and anti-Semitism, and we had successes because we keep track of our cases to see about the success. And we have partners with Harvard School of Public Health, the University of Chicago, the Georgia State University. So we partner with universities to help us look at our data and keep track of the success rate of our work. So the good news is people can move hate groups and change, about being anti-Semite or be hateful. So that is the good news. Now, the thing is, what we prefer, instead of being pulled when things are bad, and we, it was the opportunity to work with the school and the teachers to train them to look at the warning sign, but also for schools and teachers don't understand about what makes things worse. In fact, sometimes we have found, and I'm not going to say where in the Boston and greater Boston, public school, but we have found that sometimes schools create a neo-Nazi kid, create an Islamist kid, create a far-left kid, because I think that we need to take a look and educate our educators to understand the do's and the don'ts, And remember, like Arno was saying, we call actually at Parents for Peace extremism a drug of choice. It's literally like a coping mechanism, like someone would reach out to booze and drugs to cope with their pissed off whatever happening with them, And so this is how it's used, Creating, hate, a scapegoat is, and mainly are the Jews, the scapegoat is what helps a narrative going. So the kid that is suffering understand that the suffering come from a population, therefore, when I dehumanize that population, I can hurt them. Now, when you train a school about early signs and equip them, then you rewrite that story. It's not, we take it for granted because we've done that for 10 years, but it is doable. It's truly doable.
Yeah, and just to confirm, because our role is to sort of say, are there things that we would want to recommend? The infrastructure that you're suggesting is teacher training is critical here.
Yes.
Courts need to be brought into the loop, and you, in a sense, are the crisis managing organization that when things get out of control, the kind of resources you provide become very important.
Yes, and in matter of fact, Parents for Peace started as a helpline to provide services for family members because parents don't call the cops on their kids, right? And so today, after 10 years of experience, we realize, we need to scale what we are doing. And scaling, that's why we start creating curriculum, because the problem is so huge that we are thinking train the trainers locally is really the solution.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. Chief
Yeah, I'll
Butler?
keep it brief, Chair. Thank you for your testimony. I think it's very important. As a commissioner that represents police chiefs across the Commonwealth, I would welcome a partnership to train officers, new officers, veteran officers, in not only recognizing hate crime, but the early signs of radicalization. So thank you.
Thank you. We are really appreciating it.
Commissioner Shakur? Thank you.
I'm really struck by your emphasis on education for the educators, but I also am hearing that some of this radicalization can happen sort of outside of school hours, outside of school property. And I have, in my own experience, heard many cases of someone right under their parents' nose, under that same roof, being really lured into a group. What recommendations do you have for that scenario?
We have a support group for our parents where they all meet together, and some parents who are kind of out of the woods can help guide the ones who are still in the woods. And from that support group, we have a particular mother who's from Colorado, whose son was radicalized into nihilistic violent extremism, really ugly, horrific things. And she managed to get him out of that with our guidance. And she now does public speaking of her own, raising awareness amongst parents about just how dangerous these things are and the risk that they pose to kids. And also to let parents know that even though a lot of parents will be like, well, I put on the Apple parental controls, we're good. It's like, no, you're not good. The kids will go right around that. So in answer to your question, I think storytelling is so vital. And to share the experiences of parents who have come through this successfully and have healthy children now, to warn other parents about the dangers of unsupervised internet access for kids.
Do you have a list of schools in Massachusetts where you've worked?
Yes, so the one that is public is the Ashland pilots, but the others, I think for confidentiality, we probably are not
Okay.
able to share. I need to
Okay.
check that, but I bet that if you Google us and look carefully, you'll find it very quickly.
Okay.
I won't be able to say that to you, but if you search, you will find out about, because they are public schools. And by the way, those public schools are pretty in a good neighborhood, let's say, so it's, it's really, yeah.
And I was very interested in the story that you told, and it just made me think and want to ask, are there, either in that situation or other instances where you've worked, have you seen things that happen in the school environment that make it more likely for that outcome, or put either instigate it or push it along in the wrong direction?
There was another case, the one I'm thinking about, that was straight here in Massachusetts, where it started at a school. And there are multiple factors that, you want to look into. If an individual is being bullied or isolated for whatever reason, oftentimes we see that these young people, what they'll do is, in order to validate that separationism, they'll put on the costume of, I'm ISIS, I'm a neo-Nazi, I'm a scary guy that you don't want to be around. So the nexus between school happenings and radicalization it's like Siamese twin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you also for your flexibility. I know we've been wanting to get you in. You have been so flexible, so we really appreciate it. This will be incorporated into our report. If there are other things that you have not gotten to today, or upon reflection you want to add, we're moving very quickly towards our final report, so we just encourage you to send that in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Orrin Jacobson. And he's joining us virtually.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Can you hear me all right?
Sure can. Orrin Jacobson is the Chief Executive Officer of Project Shema, and the discussion is titled Lessons from an Antisemitism Educator Supporting the Community. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to testify, and thank you for the Commission's work. Your draft, I think, makes clear how necessary it is, and I'm deeply grateful for that. As mentioned, my name is Orrin Jacobson. I'm the CEO of Project Shema. For the non-Hebrew speakers in the room, Shema means to hear, to listen, or to understand, and that's essentially the essence of our work. How do we deepen understanding across lines of difference? In the last few years, we've run more than 70 workshops in Massachusetts alone, including at Mass General and Harvard, engaging thousands across the state. Now, we educate about contemporary anti-Semitism, including on how anti-Jewish ideas or bias can surface in conversations around Israel and Palestine. Everyone recognizes a swastika as hate, but the discourse around Israel and Palestine, where identity, trauma, and power collide around a small piece of land which two peoples have deep ancestral ties to, is where understanding most often breaks down. Now, our work creates nuanced, empathetic spaces for learning and dialogue, helping people listen and engage even amid deep disagreement, and expanding empathy for the Jewish lived experience as an antidote to bias and bigotry. While we as a Jewish organization center the Jewish experience and history, we also believe it's essential to hold similar spaces to honor, explore, and understand the experience of Palestinians and others impacted by what happens in the region. Now, my grandfather was born in a town called Lublin, Poland, where there were roughly 40,000 Jews before World War II, which, by the way, is about the size of Fenway Park. Only 3% of the Jews from my grandfather's hometown survived. That history has shaped my life, much of which has been dedicated to fighting bigotry and advancing movements for progress in this country, including founding and building a multi-state organization that brings men into the fight to protect and expand reproductive rights and access. So when I speak today, especially about the challenges emerging in some more progressive ecosystems, so that won't be the only focus of my remarks, I do so from a deep commitment to building a more free, fair, and inclusive Commonwealth and nation for all. I want to ground my comments in Project Shema's analysis of how Jews lose collective safety in societies where we are a small minority. Historically, two conditions must converge. First, the erosion of civil rights protections for minority groups, protections reliably only upheld in small d democratic societies. Protections like free speech, for example, are foundational to that challenge. Second, the widespread exclusion of Jews from civic and social life, when Jews are blamed by many, trusted by few, and pushed out of spaces and places where we once belonged, becoming the cleaved, excluded, and isolated outsider. Both of these conditions must exist together for Jews to lose collective safety. That's why when Rumeysa Öztürk was taken off the street, many asked me my view of her words, and my answer then and now is the same. It doesn't matter what she has said. When a government can make people disappear, civil rights are eroding, which undermines Jewish safety too. At the same time, ideas that demonize or dehumanize Jews are being normalized, including, but not only, in discourse around Israel and Palestine. And both of these dynamics must be confronted. Too often, debates fixate on labeling a comment or a person as inherently anti-Semitic, or identifying which political side poses the real threat, turning a structural issue into a partisan fight that actually masks how anti-Semitism endangers Jews at a systemic level. Reducing anti-Semitism to the problem of just the left or the right obscures reality, denies the lessons of history given that mass violence and persecution against the Jewish people have come from all directions and in all types of societies, and weakens safety for all. Now, there are four key problems that allow anti-Jewish ideas to go unnoticed and unchecked, and each of which must be addressed for education to be effective. We're seeing these challenges across Massachusetts and beyond on campus, in K-12 schools, in civic spaces, and even in workplaces. First, most people don't understand what it means to be Jewish. Jews are often viewed simply as a religious community, as if being Jewish means practicing Judaism. But Jews have identified as a people or a nation for thousands of years longer than the basic idea of organized religion, and one can actually be Jewish and an atheist. The word Jew doesn't come from the word Judaism, it's actually the reverse. Jew comes from the word Yehudi, the people of Judah in the ancient land of Israel. Judaism is the codified expression of our people's culture, history, traditions, and spirituality, developed in part during exile from our ancestral homeland to preserve our collective identity. And that distinction really matters. The Commission's draft currently describes the Jewish relationship to Israel in purely religious terms, which I would argue is inaccurate. That relationship is ancestral, cultural, and familial. It's who we are and where we come from, and for some, also deeply spiritual. It's a connection rooted in a tie to a place that gave birth to our people, our culture, our history, and our traditions, but not necessarily the government of a state. Second, most people don't understand what anti-Semitism is. Because Jewish identity is misdefined, anti-Semitism is often perceived as a religious form of bigotry. But contemporary anti-Semitism is more racialized and conspiratorial, usually targeting Jews as a people, not Judaism as a faith. The issue isn't how we pray, it's the recurring fantasy that Jews secretly control or corrupt society, or that we are the worst example of society's ills. Third, most people don't understand how anti-Semitism works. Safety is often imagined as static and tied to power, but anti-Semitism operates in a more cyclical fashion. Jews have been safe in diaspora for periods, only for that safety to erode quickly. This pattern has repeated across history and geography, regardless of how Jews have been racialized in that society, white in Europe or brown and black in the Middle East and North Africa. Neither skin color nor status has ultimately ensured safety for Jews in those societies. Fourth, Jewish voices are too often dismissed or treated as less credible, or we listen only to those who confirm our preferred narrative. Too many institutions and leaders are approaching these issues through a binary lens that erases complexity and history and narrows empathy. Binary thinking is antithetical to a healthy pluralistic society, and it creates the space needed for anti-Jewish ideas to travel, which enables permission structures for exclusion or worse. Simply put, because Jews, who are an incredibly diverse people, are often seen as a white religious group with power, our concerns are more easily dismissed by some, even as white supremacist movements argue that we're not white at all. These are the four foundational gaps: misunderstanding what it means to be Jewish, what anti-Semitism is, how it functions, and the lack of trust given to the Jewish perspective globally. And unless we address these first, we can't actually navigate the deeper emotionally charged debates around Israel and Palestine in healthy and empathetic ways. But solving these gaps creates the conditions for education that fosters empathy and understanding without requiring agreement on politics or policy, and most importantly, all of this is possible without silencing free speech. We've seen this approach consistently unlock nuanced discussion, depolarize hard conversations, and build empathy across communities. At Harvard, for example, more than 1,000 participants have joined our programs over the last academic year. The willingness to recommend score from those participants is above 8.5 out of 10, and participants reported significant increases in their willingness to intervene when they see problems, which are our most important outcomes. I want to quickly summarize the key points above and add one final thought in closing. First, Jewish collective safety is most at risk when two things happen: civil rights protections for minorities are eroded, and Jews are blamed, distrusted, and pushed out of shared spaces, becoming excluded, isolated outsiders. This is why we must protect democracy and push back against exclusionary binary thinking or conspiracies that blame Jews for our problems. Second, effective anti-Semitism education must help people understand what it means to be Jewish, how anti-Semitism operates, and how to engage in pluralistic, empathetic discourse around Israel and Palestine, even when we are rightfully angered by Israeli government actions. Finally, because anti-Semitism often feels complex, I want to offer one simple framework: the good Jew versus the bad Jew. This ancient idea normalizes anti-Semitism and is resurfacing today. It allows people to say, I'm not against all Jews, just certain kinds of Jews with plausible deniability against charges of anti-Semitism. But whether the bad Jews are those who believe in Israel's right to exist, called Zionists, or those who vote for Democratic candidates, as President Trump has recently claimed, the message is the same. The Jews who are welcome are the ones who conform to your views, which ultimately means Jews as we aren't actually fully welcome at all. That's why for us at Project Shema, the fundamental question is always, how do you talk about and treat Jews, especially Jews who don't perfectly adhere to your political perspective? Thank you again for your time and your critical work, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much. Are there questions from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Friedman.
Thanks so much, Owen. I agree with a lot of what you said. Question for you. You mentioned it early that you're trying to have conversations with nuance and empathy, but what do we do when there are some activists who don't want nuance and empathy and reject it? And for instance, the MTA has a group of teachers, not all of them, who sent us a written letter earlier this year saying, there's only one side. There's no two sides to 75 years of Israel's apartheid, racism, and genocide. So they don't want nuance and empathy for people who have a tie to Israel. So what do you do with that?
So David, I think about this question at an institutional level, not an individual level or a group level. And what I mean by that is I think institutions in the Commonwealth have to make a decision about what it is that they're trying to build and for whom. And I don't mean which political ideologies or ideas. I mean whether or not they want to build pluralistic institutions that encourage dialogue across difference. One of the things that we've seen both locally and nationally is that many institutions have grown afraid of the loudest voices, and by virtue of sort of that fear, rather than actively creating space for the 80 or 90% of the constituency they serve to step into this dialogue, the spaces and institutions have devolved around voices that are deeply unrepresentative. Most people actually want to ask questions. Most people actually want to talk about this. Most people want to explore this. And regardless of their perspectives on the actions of the Israeli government or the history, I also believe that most people don't actually want to hurt or harm Jews. But the social costs of engaging this conversation are so high, especially when activists like the ones you're mentioning are putting a very binary framework onto this and then sort of targeting individuals who say, hold on here, this is a little bit more complicated. But it's up to the institutions, in my mind, whether that's a teachers union, a school, a workplace, an NGO, to say, our purpose here is to create a more pluralistic space. And I think that's really critical because I'm also imagine that all of those same activists, and by the way, I don't want to speak about them in the abstract. I've got relationships with people, including my own family, who have very vehement disagreements about what's happening there in its history. But an approach to politics and people that is that flat, that binary, doesn't just undermine Jewish safety. I would say it also undermines the very foundations of a democratic society, which require a pluralistic exploration of ideas, which doesn't require you and me to agree, David, on everything, but it does require me to at least try to empathize with your perspective and treat you at an individual level and the community at a collective level with some amount of respect, dignity, and nuance.
So I was actually looking for clarification. When you talked about the work that you're doing on campuses and over 1,000 people that have participated, is it specifically with faculty and administrators? Are you doing any kind of work with students either in higher ed or even in high schools or beyond?
Yeah, great question. The vast majority of our work is at the administrative and staff level, not at the student level, which doesn't mean we never do student programming. But we've really focused in particular at the administrative and staff level because those are the folks that are permanent. Those are the folks who sort of establish and maintain the cultural norms of the institution. And so that's really been where our focus has been primarily.
And if I may, a follow-up question. I assume you're tracking, have you any kind of research or surveys or any kind of data that talks to the outcome of these trainings moving forward and how they get implemented within the institutions and the impact that it may have on the students?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Yes, we do surveys before and after workshops to understand the ways in which attitudes, understanding, perspectives shift. So we measure that. We also obviously stay in contact with the institutions themselves and provide ongoing support to the leaders who are trying to implement changes. To be clear, our focus is not on specific policies. It's around culture. It's around how do we depolarize the space. So what we're looking for in a given institution is, by virtue of the workshops and education that we bring, can we lower the temperature ability and create the space for people to actually talk to each other? Because what's happening in most places right now is that 20% of the people are talking, 80% of the people are silent because they're afraid. And if we can bring the other 80% into that conversation, what we find is that the pressure in the system deflates, the conversations become healthier, and the culture gets better.
Thank you.
Other commissioner questions? Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you. It was an excellent presentation. In talking about K through 12 environments, we run into times when there are teachers, educators, principals who feel that the classroom is a place to promote justice and advance the cause of justice, and you seem to be arguing for a kind of academic pluralism which creates spaces for discussion. That's a difficult conflict that exists in many spaces right now. Are there particular academic norms or recommendations that you would have to sort of recognize that some people are compelled by their understanding of what justice requires, but there's other more dominant requirements of an academic environment? Or how do you deal with that tension in a way that's
it's a great question.
replicable?
Yeah, it's a great question. And let me say, as someone who has spent a fair amount of my time as an activist, I very much appreciate the urge towards activism. When we've talked with K-12 schools, I try to keep the basic framework really simple. And I think there's a difference between the institutional leaders and teachers encouraging civic participation, right? So like if students want to organize a walkout and like exercise their democratic principles and practice the engagement in civics and politics, I'm all for an approach that teaches young people how to be active, engaged citizens and supports the basic principle of that civic democratic participation. I think that's a very different story than somebody in the classroom from a position of structural power in that classroom, using that classroom time to advocate for their own personal perspective on complicated topics, especially ones in which you may have a Jewish student in the classroom in this case, who will immediately feel as if they're unsafe and can't speak or might be held accountable individually for the actions of the Israeli government. So for me, the distinction is, how do you cultivate a sense of civic participation and embrace and support that general idea without using sort of the power of the classroom to push your own perspective? I do believe that at K-12 in particular, that the goal should be to teach people, how to think and not what to think, and develop the critical faculties that can set somebody up for success, rather than to say, this is absolute right, wrong. And I think good education on the topic in particular of Israel and Palestine requires dual narrative and empathetic frameworks. Otherwise, you create a condition under which you're likely to normalize harmful ideas in one direction or the other, as opposed to trying to help people see and hear these stories together, even in places where those stories don't neatly fit or feel like the complete opposite.
Should there be structural restraints on teachers or other educators using their classroom time to advance their own agendas? And if so, what would those look like?
And can you define structural restraints for me?
Regulatory, academic norms, regulatory norms, guidelines, anything that sort of suggests that independent of what their view is, what a person's view is, that kind of conduct is somehow violative of basic norms.
I think my answer to this question is less a policy answer than a normative one, which is, I believe that all institutions, especially K-12 schools, should adopt content-neutral policies for the ways in which their instructors are engaging issues in the classroom. I get very, as you mentioned, as I mentioned in my comments, the question of free speech is forefront in my head in all of these conversations, and I recognize that inside of a classroom, free speech is not exactly the same than it is generally yelling at the government. There are time, place restriction manners, et cetera. But I hesitate to want to lay too heavy of a hand, especially on a single specific issue. But what I would argue and advocate for is sort of two things. Number one, that the school itself needs to have a expected normative approach to the ways in which teachers approach topics that are content neutral, meaning the rules shouldn't be about Israel and Palestine, they should be content neutral, that the focus should be on how to think as opposed to what to think. And I think, and then third, and I listened a little bit to the previous testimony, I also think it's really important that we prepare teachers to be able to create the type of healthy ecosystems that we're seeking in the classroom. What I mean by that is the average teacher may or may not have the training, resource, support for how to establish and maintain the norms that create sort of more healthy civil discourse. I'll add one thing to this, which is I was at the University of Illinois not too long ago, and I was speaking with one of the deans of the liberal arts schools, and they were talking about the challenges they were having in liberal arts schools around like even having this conversation. And I just paused and I said, what training have you given your teachers for how to set up the classroom the right way? What training have you given your young people for how to have this conversation? And I don't think that it's realistic to expect young people to engage any of these difficult topics in a way that is healthy if we don't have teachers who are prepared to teach them how to do so, who have a normative value set of saying, I am actually trying to create a positive, healthy culture in my school for the sake of creating a positive, healthy culture for my community. And that requires intentionally cultivating the right norms, processes, systems, and skills to enable people to talk to each other again.
Thank you for your very, very clear answer and presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jacobson, I want to note that there are a few portions of our current draft that note your collaboration with Simmons University in Massachusetts. If there's any other information with which you want to supply us to incorporate that will make it easier for Massachusetts institutions to collaborate with Project Shema, we would welcome that in the next few days. Thank you so much
Happy
for
to do
your
so.
contribution today. Thank you as well for your flexibility. I know we've moved your date around a few times, so thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for letting a Bears fan in the room. Have a good day.
Right. We are going to move on. We have in person Karen Cohen and Rebecca Lehman. This is a discussion on research and interventions to support Jews in the workplace. Karen is a member of the Center for Combating Anti-Semitism's Advisory Committee with CJP, and Rebecca is the Chief of Staff for the National Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Chair Cataldo and members of the Special Commission on Combating Anti-Semitism, it is a privilege to be speaking with you today to share about the work we at CLAL have been doing on a national level to support Jewish employees in the workplace. I want to start by saying it's remarkable the work you all are doing to advance the combating of anti-Semitism in the institutions where it might otherwise be overlooked. Thank you for your effort, investment, and support to enhance the Commonwealth. I think we can all agree it's been increasingly challenging being Jewish these days, and that includes in our workplaces. We spend most of our awake hours at work, and Jews are feeling unsafe, desiring better support from their employers, and craving connections with other Jewish colleagues. I'm Rebecca Lehman. I'm the Chief of Staff at CLAL, the National Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership, a Jewish think tank in New York, and I lead the Jewish at Work initiative. I came to this work as I started the Jewish Employee Resource Group at PricewaterhouseCoopers in 2021, and informally at Bridgewater Associates in 2023. I then started coaching peers looking to do the same. Since October 7th, however, the landscape changed. I went from coaching people to realizing something larger was needed. We didn't know what exactly, so we started with research. In the fall of 2024, we conducted a first-of-its-kind national study on the landscape of Jewish employee resource groups as a vehicle to understand Jewish life in the workplace. The study included a survey of almost 1,500 Jews across a range of industries with various levels of employee resource group participation. There were 40% at companies with ERGs, 60% at companies without ERGs. And we conducted 10 focus groups with 58 Jewish ERG members and leaders. At a high level, we found that there is, in fact, demand for gathering with other Jews in the workplace. From October 2023 to October 2024, there was a 709% increase in the number of groups participating in the Jewish ERG network, from 44 to 312 members. A Boston ERG member shared in a focus group, "I've always kept my personal life separate from work. After October 7th, I realized I can't. I'm Jewish, and I'm not dealing with some of the negativity toward me and my coworkers. So when I heard about the ERG, I jumped on it." Nearly half of ERG members joined like him after October 7th. Clearly the demand is there. Before we go into some of the challenges, I'd like to start by highlighting some of the bright spots, a few of the amazing Jewish things happening in the workplace today. We have one non-religious leader who has taken it upon himself to write a weekly Dvar Torah, a short teaching on the weekly Torah portion that he calls the weekly ramblings. Each week, he shares reflections that connect ancient wisdom with things that happen in his own life or at work. And people genuinely look forward to reading it. There are incredible holiday celebrations and quarterly Shabbat dinners happening. This year, a few companies even built sukkahs at the office so colleagues could share meals together during the holiday of Sukkot. During Jewish American Heritage Month in May, countless creative and educational programs are shining a light on what it means to be Jewish in the workplace, from lunch and learns to storytelling events. And others are working behind the scenes to raise awareness with senior leadership, ensuring that no major events or deadlines fall on Jewish holidays. Moving on to the challenges, I said I would share next. Unfortunately, we found that 1/3 of Jewish employees reported feeling unsafe being openly Jewish at work, with it varying by industry. Worse in healthcare, tech, and nonprofit. Boston employees fared slightly better across the board. 22% of Boston respondents reported feeling unsafe being openly Jewish at work, compared to that 32% nationally. And only 6% considered leaving their jobs due to workplace discrimination, compared to 14% nationally. It's unclear why Boston performed better on the survey, but perhaps due to some of the efforts being done by CJP, as my colleague Karen will share, and how seriously you all are taking anti-Semitism in the workplace. So what can be done? When asked in the survey what offerings would be most supportive for Jewish employees, the top request was for anti-Semitism training. And the data further contextualizes the desire for anti-Semitism training. Only 58% trust their employers to handle anti-Semitism incidences appropriately. More training is needed. Likewise, we found that Jewish employees leading their employee resource groups were often thrust into these positions despite being unequipped or ready to lead. A Boston social worker shared, I sought out support from the DEI liaison and was invited to start an ERG. It was not a choice. Another mid-level product designer shared when asked what made her want to step up and be involved in the leadership team. She said, no, quote, no one else would take it on. I stepped up to help fill a gap. And many currently are feeling burnout after doing this job on top of their day job responsibilities for the last few years. There is, quote, limited time to devote to ERG on top of my work responsibilities, said Boston survey respondent in academia. So based on these research findings, we have created conferences for other ERG leaders, and most recently created a preliminary resource portal for Jewish employees to share and access each other's events, vetted speakers in a speakers bureau, and various resources to best lead their Jewish employee network. We kept hearing that leaders are facing burnout and don't have time to plan creative events despite their interests on top of their busy jobs. So this portal will help make programming better and easier to plan, leveraging best-in-class programs from other ERGs. Based on this, our recommendation is for the Commonwealth to further support Jewish ERGs in companies. One way is through requiring companies to have anti-Semitism training in addition to other safety trainings. From the research, we learned this is the primary request of Jewish employees. And secondly, the Commonwealth can make sure Jewish ERGs have access to resources and supports like this Jewish at Work resource portal to meaningfully plan for having Jewish connection at work. Thank you for all the work you are doing, and I'll pass it to my colleague Karen to share more.
Thank you.
Apologies in advance for a lingering cough and cold, which you will undoubtedly hear. Chair Cataldo and members of the Special Commission on Combating Anti-Semitism, thank you for the time today and the opportunity to speak with you more about our local work to address anti-Semitism in the workplace and how the Commission can support this work. Before I start, I just want to thank each of you, and particularly the co-chairs, for the work that you're doing and for your partnership in advancing this critical work in the Commonwealth. Your clarity and leadership to advance meaningful action in schools, higher education, workplaces, and communities is deeply needed and appreciated. I am here as a member of Combined Jewish Philanthropy's Center on Combating Anti-Semitism's Advisory Committee. The urgency and momentum for this work is growing. When Governor Healy spoke at the New England Council breakfast in June, she told the room, quote, anti-Semitism has no place anywhere in Massachusetts or across this country, and we've got to stand up and take care of one another. These words at this event to this audience had meaning beyond measure. Why? because we need our local civic and business institutions to join their employees and take action to address anti-Semitism and to ensure that Jews feel safe and like they belong. Those words from the highest elected leader in our state also speak volumes on a more basic level. They told Jews across the Commonwealth that we are seen. Our workplaces need more bold, innovative, and public displays of allyship. Our business leaders need to be active participants, not silent observers, in combating anti-Semitism. As you heard from Rebecca, we've collectively been increasing our investment and focus in this space to support Jewish employees and improve workplace culture. The average person spends roughly 1/3 of their life at work, and from data you heard, the vast majority of Boston survey participants feel it's important to bring their full Jewish selves to work. We know that when employees feel supported, valued, and that they can be themselves, companies succeed and our society thrives. But in the wake of October 7th, we received an outpouring of calls, supported by the research data you heard from Rebecca, from Jewish employees across a wide range of sectors, from healthcare to higher education, to finance, to law, and many more, that they felt ignored at best and demonized at worst. Since then, we've learned that there's a vast lack of understanding and awareness about Jewish identity, contemporary anti-Semitism, and its impacts. As such, there was also little understanding and awareness of the role workplaces can play to prevent and respond to it. We've brought in training partners, just like Oren, who you heard from, to help fill this gap in Boston. To move the needle within workplaces and build momentum with corporate and organizational leaders, we started to work with Jewish and Israeli employees themselves to create spaces of dialogue, connection, and learning through Jewish employee resource groups. You've heard from Rebecca about the tremendous growth of Jewish ERGs nationally from 2003 to 2004. In Boston, CJP doubled its network of Jewish ERG leaders that we work with over time. CJP is now providing leadership skills and training to Jewish ERG leaders, direct financial stipends to Jewish ERGs to help their growth, as well as cultural programs and anti-Semitism training through partners like Project Shema. And we work with national partners like Klal to help centralize resources for Jewish ERGs to make programs and trainings more accessible. We work with Jewish ERGs at some of Boston's largest employers, such as Northeastern, Harvard, Mass General Brigham, the Boston Foundation, Ernst & Young, and Eastern Bank. We also support employees who are trying to get Jewish ERGs off the ground, and we work with Jewish employees who are forming spaces of connection, even if they're not formal ERGs. This work is having an impact. Just a few weeks ago, leaders of Mass General Brigham's Jewish ERG led a first ever regional conference on anti-Semitism in healthcare. Eastern Bank's ERG last year hosted about 45 employees, Jewish and not Jewish, at an ERG-led Passover Seder. 45 employees across 36 workplaces attended CJP's first ever Jewish ERG leadership convening in the spring for a day of leadership development and relationship building, at which we were also grateful that co-chair Vilas attended and reinforced our Jewish ERG leaders the support they have in state government in ensuring we can bring our full selves to work. Jewish ERG members and civic leaders built spaces of connection with our support this year too at the Red Sox Jewish American Heritage Night and at the Nova exhibition in Boston and more. Jewish employees need continued support to keep these spaces growing. Some still face barriers in getting these groups off the ground and need employer support. And we need this continued groundswell of engagement to bring more civic and corporate leaders to the table. The Commission has a critical and timely opportunity to help support this work. We appreciate the draft recommendations that the Commission put forward that they're considering to strengthen workplace policies and practices and support the creation and expansion of Jewish ERGs in the workplace. However, there's more opportunity to support the foundation and momentum we've laid in the field. We urge the Commission to first support safe spaces for Jewish employees, including, though not exclusively, through employee-led Jewish affinity groups in the public sector, in state agencies, and in the private sector. Jewish ERGs already exist in a few state agencies. The state should identify these existing ERGs and provide outreach and space for listening and learning in order to support their needs and growth. These spaces should be supported not as religious or faith-based ERGs only, but also as ethnicity shared heritage ERGs, given the multifaceted nature of Jewish identity and expression. Leaders should be appointing mentors or liaisons with organizational leadership to support programming. Second, increase anti-Semitism and cultural awareness training throughout state agencies, corporations, and workplaces in Greater Boston. Mandate anti-Semitism education training for all state agencies, including for leaders of agencies and agencies' culture, DEI. Third, in addition to the recommendations you're already considering in your draft report, similar to the above, encourage employers to facilitate collaborations between Jewish ERGs within their companies and within sectors to broaden understanding of Jewish identity and how it intersects with other identities to build allyship. 4, recommend the state largest employers convene to understand the landscape of anti-Semitism, how it's manifesting within workplaces, and share best practices and strategies to tackling these issues. Davos World Economic Forum had hosted roundtables in the past few years dedicated to convening world business leaders about anti-Semitism. It would be powerful to see this replicated in Massachusetts as a natural and wonderful and powerful follow-up in order to drive solutions led by the business community. By adopting these recommendations, the Commonwealth can continue to be a competitive place to work and live, and an inclusive Commonwealth for Jews. Thank you for your partnership and leadership, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I'd ask you to send in those recommendations in writing, if you don't mind, to either Matt Cooper or the SCCA email address. I know your colleague Melissa has that information. Are there questions or comments from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Friedman.
Thank you so much for the work you do. You and Melissa Garlick and other leaders are tremendous. Just briefly, we've done an enormous amount of work over a year, thanks to Chair Cataldo and Chair Vilas, but we just haven't had the chance to focus the spotlight on the nonprofit sector and the arts sector. And you mentioned nonprofits, which are massive parts of the Massachusetts economy. I have personal firsthand knowledge from of Jewish people feeling unsafe in LGBTQ plus nonprofit groups, in legal aid organizations that have nothing to do with these issues, in arts organizations. What, if anything, can we do to shine a light on that and to engage with those organizations in those sectors?
I will defer to Melissa about more specifics on Massachusetts arts and nonprofits. I will say that this work is being done in other states. For example, San Francisco area and other parts of California has convened a group of leaders in the arts and culture and philanthropic space who have either faced discrimination or are being kind of confronted with some of the challenges, and in some cases looking for Jewish identity that they themselves have never explored until they were faced with anti-Semitism. And that environment, that ERG, if you will, or virtual ERG, is not only doing training and education and support along with the resources that Rebecca mentioned, but they're also doing Jewish identity development, learning, studying, connecting. So it has a real positive, not just a negative bend. But I do agree that we've seen nationally this is a really important and problematic space where there's an opportunity to do more.
I could add, since our survey identified that nonprofit sector was struggling pretty significantly more than average, we did additional research into the nonprofit space with a partner, and that's ongoing, and I'm happy to share some of that.
On that note, we do have some of CLAL's data in our current draft report. If there are data points that you think are particularly important for us to raise up, we'd like to have that feedback by Monday or Tuesday, if possible. Thank you. Other commissioner questions? Thank you so much for the work you're doing. It's really important. It will be incorporated into our report.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
We're going to have one more panel, and then we're going to take a short break. We're doing okay on time. Rabbi Lowenthal and Rabbi Schwartz, would you come up, please? And this portion of our meeting is Perspectives on Anti-Semitism from Massachusetts Clergy of Teruah, the Rabbinic Call for Human Rights. We have Rabbi Jessica Lowenthal and Rabbi, is it Eliza or Eliza?
Eliza.
Eliza Schwartz. Thanks so much for joining us, and take it away.
Thank you so much. So first, I want to thank you all for having us here. Again, my name is Rabbi Eliza Schwartz. I'm from Temple Hillel B'nai Torah in West Roxbury.
And I'm Rabbi Jessica Lowenthal from Temple Beth Shalom up in Melrose.
And we're both here representing the Massachusetts cluster of Teruah, the Rabbinic Call for Human Rights. Just a little bit about Teruah. Teruah is a rabbinic organization with a membership of 2,300 rabbis and cantors, 200 here in Massachusetts. And we're committing to fighting for human rights rooted in our Jewish traditions and teachings. We bring Torah's ideals of human dignity, equality, and justice to life by empowering rabbis and cantors to be moral voices, specifically. And here in Mass, we run programs for and organize Jewish clergy here around justice-based issues, including anti-Semitism, immigration, and criminal justice reform. Teruah has a lot of experience working in deep and diverse coalitions, which has allowed us to really live out these ideals and deepen our understanding of these issues through real-life work and experience. And at Teruah, we care deeply about fighting anti-Semitism in all its forms and have been a leader in the Jewish community on this issue. Rabbi Jill Jacobs, our CEO, is an outspoken leader on anti-Semitism and on all forms of oppression. And as a congregational leader myself, and both of us, I spend a lot of time with Temple members who are very, very worried about the rise of anti-Semitism in the US, especially in this moment. And especially a lot of young kids and teens, too, who are experiencing anti-Semitism in schools. And as simply a human myself, I often find myself worried about my own safety, given my identity as a Jew and especially as a public-facing Jew. So we're glad to be doing the really important work of fighting anti-Semitism together, to be working together as a team, all of us, to try to do this in the most effective ways possible. What we want to start off by saying is that we know that this commission was formed and given a mandate under the Biden-Harris administration, and Teruah actually supported this plan and was involved in its advocacy and the creation of the creation process of the plan. And to name the obvious, which we all know, the national context we're living now under is much, much different. So first of all, number one, we just want to appreciate the quite difficult context that you all are put in, having been given a mandate under one administration and now operating under a different one, so just appreciate that. And second of all, we want to say as Teruah that we feel strongly, and I can say certainly the grand majority, if not every single one of the hundreds of Jews I work with, that we are very, very concerned about the national context for our own safety and how it affects us, even though we're living here in Massachusetts. And also for those of us in my congregation being in Boston as a sanctuary city, we're especially worried about that, and we believe that it is important and crucial for anyone working on anti-Semitism to be loudly and explicitly naming as central to our analysis and behavior on fighting anti-Semitism that we're fighting the use in the federal government of our Jewish fear to attack democratic norms, which we see happening in many places. And for one example, as we all know, with the attacks on higher ed. So I'll speak a little bit about that, but mainly want to stress that we think under this different context, actually naming this explicitly as central is our best chance at fighting anti-Semitism in this current political moment, which was different than before. So first of all, we, because of all this, want to thank you for including some of this in the recommendations. I'll just quote you all in the recommendations here, and thank you for this. Many people in Massachusetts, including many Jews, object to measures that the current federal government is taking in response to anti-Semitism, including actions that target some of Massachusetts' most prized institutions, and believe that anti-Semitism is being used for political purposes. The courts have struck down various actions by the administration as violating the civil rights of other vulnerable groups and individuals, most notably immigrants. Jews widely recognize and have relearned many times throughout history that narrow nationalisms never end well for Jews. And as such, threats to democracy are intrinsically threatening to the Jewish people. Conversely, Jews generally flourish in robust democracies that protect the freedoms of all minorities. So I just want to thank you for that in the report and really appreciate it. And you also wrote specifically about higher ed and those attacks on higher ed, and want to thank you for that as well. And we want to stress that in addition to what you wrote there, specifically you wrote a lot about this use of anti-Semitism and that Jewish students will also be hurt by this. Also feels crucial to us to just keep explicitly naming, again, and central to the analysis, that we feel it's dangerous to make use of Jewish fear in order to attack progressivism and liberal institutions. That's what the administration is doing on a national level, with institutions of higher ed being one example of what they view as progressive thought among other places they're targeting. And it's not only that the attacks on institutions of higher ed affect Jewish students, which they do, and which is important to say, but it's that these attacks on these institutions are actually enabled and excused by this blaming of this is for Jews, enabled, which is very classic trope where we are the face of attacks on progressivism and liberal institutions. So it's incredibly important to state clearly that our fear will not be used in that way, especially at times when we're really scared and could easily be manipulated or confused. And leaders on anti-Semitism need to be really sharp about this because it's tricky and our people can get confused. And we need to be leaders of this. And in Massachusetts, I think we have a chance at doing that. And so I also just want to point out, which we know, but just to name it explicitly, to show don't tell what I'm talking about, that the authors of Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, wrote a plan that they entitled their plan to combat anti-Semitism, Project Esther. But it's pretty clear if you read the plan that barely any Jews were actually consulted in its writing. And just invite people to look at the Heritage Foundation's website. It's chillingly housed under their category of progressivism. So I recommend people just take a look at that. And again, as a central tenet of fighting this, we have to be sharp about that. So specifically, I want to quote and read the words of my colleague, Cantor Vera Brookhuizen, who's the co-chair of TRUA NA, our steering committee, in what she wrote about our vision of safety, that is not in isolating Jews and keeping us away from the protection of other groups, but actually exactly the opposite, which keeps us safe. And so these are her words, and thank you, Cantor Vera. There is no legislation in the world that can force people who don't know me to understand me as a Jew and to care personally about my Jewish safety, much less people who feel hurt or attacked by my co-religionist actions. But robust, mutually supportive interfaith action and dialogue creates effective allyship and can be a prophylactic against anti-Semitism. Jews can't shout anti-Semitism down, but when we show up for each other, when I enter into conversation with my neighbors and wider community members, when we say to each other, here's what I value, here's what scares me, here's what hurts me. I want to hear about you. What do you value? What scares you? What hurts you? That sharing gives us the opportunity to start caring about what happens to each other and to act to support and to protect one another. We were surprised, therefore, to see that the interfaith solidarity building sentence was relegated to just a single sentence on the final page of this commission's draft final report. I want to point that out. The Biden-Harris U.S. national strategy to counter anti-Semitism, on which this commission's, as we talked about, establishment was based, positions build cross-community solidarity and collective action to counter hate as one of its 4 pillars of effective strategy. And cultivating interfaith solidarity cannot be an afterthought of our state strategy in Massachusetts. We need to make it central. So we hope to see the Commission's final recommendations include identifying and scaling the most effective cross-community solidarity building efforts for implementation here in Massachusetts, and specifically mainly for establishing a state office of faith-based and neighborhood partnerships from the Biden-Harris recommendations to offer both resources for best practices and practical support in building cross-community solidarity through such activities as dialogue, learning opportunities, volunteering, and joint or reciprocal meals and celebrations. That office is really, really important to us at TRUA. We also just want to go on record here asking that as part of our strategy here in Massachusetts to combat anti-Semitism, that this commission also recommend and advocate for measures of equality that are already proposed here in the state, including the establishment of a permanent commission on the status of people who practice Islam and the establishment of a commission on the status of transgender people. I want to go on record of that too. And especially, our main ask about the Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, we believe that Massachusetts can be a leader here, actually in a different version of positive safety for all that is different than what's happening on the national level. We can be a leader here in fighting hate and building a commonwealth with a positive vision of safety for all people. So thank you, and I'll pass it to Robert.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello again. I just want to say that I have been a Massachusetts resident pretty much my whole life. I was born in Framingham, and I still live here with a quick trip to DC and Israel. So I care deeply about Massachusetts, and I have grown up in our public school systems, and I learned a lot of my values and how to be in diverse communities from growing up in Framingham. I've been an educator for over 2 decades, working in Jewish spaces and with public schools around anti-Semitism and Holocaust. I bring a group of adult children of Holocaust survivors to local schools to speak, and we weave in the history of various countries' actions and the experiences faced by their Jewish population, giving both an understanding of the complexity and the hugeness of what was called the Holocaust, but it really is so much more, as well as the individual stories and how the trauma has impacted families for generations and will for generations. One of the most painful realizations has been that the history we've tried so hard to teach in the hope we could prevent such a horror from happening again seems to have fallen on somewhat deaf ears, because once again the Jewish population is being used to divide communities that are used as a pawn by people on all sides. Just as we were once both communists and capitalists at the same time, today we are cast as the villains to whichever story happens to be told. When preparing for this panel, I worked with colleagues whom I sometimes disagree with. We do not all understand Zionism or anti-Zionism in the same way, and yet it is not just important, but it is necessary for us to be in conversation and to see each other as respected colleagues who are able to have these hard conversations and, yes, disagreements. After all, it is the basis of Rabbinic Judaism to argue for the sake of heaven, and I know that my colleagues and I are doing just that. We are engaging together because we all care deeply about Israelis and Palestinians and are trying to move towards a place of possible peace one day. And the only way to do this is by listening to narratives that challenge us and sometimes upset us. There's, of course, a line not advocating propaganda or outright lies, which we have seen come up time and again, but still to deal with the complexity that history demands. You cannot legislate good educators. It's a gift that some people have, and some people need a lot of work to get there. But you can absolutely legislate bad education, education that is too afraid of challenge and honesty. By blocking the necessary conversations our students will demand in an effort to protect a community from harm. This has just never worked, especially in our incredibly viral world. Our job is to help our students understand where their information comes from and how to parse through the many different narratives that all hold some aspect of truth. One concern that we've seen come up in our community is the usage of one particular definition, which will cast too wide or too narrow of a net and be used irresponsibly as a weapon rather than a guideline, And we greatly appreciate the draft language that does not codify any one definition and encourages us to use multiples to understand the nuances. We are also interested in understanding the reporting system that is proposed. There is, I can tell you stories of situations where I've spoken with teachers and dealt in schools because there have been mishaps in classrooms. But we also know that shutting down the ability to have conversations won't help our students. And the fear is that if it's too loosely of a reporting mechanism, that teachers will just say, we're not having any conversations around this topic, and our students are going to end up on TikTok figuring that that is all the truth that they need, which I'm pretty sure nobody here prefers. So rather than banning these conversations and lessons, we must turn to experts who can help our educators, and we've heard from so many of them just today. Working with local community leaders and bringing in programs like the one I lead, or Project Shema, or Parents for Peace, having conversations amongst the teachers, training the trainer before they can begin certain topics. These are all ways that we can support our students and our very large and diverse Jewish community. Again, creating an Office of Interfaith Relations can help us strategize and share resources so that each district is not having to start from scratch or figure out who they need to call when a crisis occurs. We need to bring talented educators together in our own fields, in their own fields, and create opportunities for more growth so that we can create a positive educational system here in Massachusetts that can lead the way of having hard conversations and finding the balance between them. We are living in a world in desperate need of bravery. Bravery among our youth, bravery among our leaders, and we are relying on this commission to help this state move towards that place of bravery. So thank you for all that you have done and for all the work you have put in, and thank you for having us here.
Thank you so much. Thanks in particular for reading the last version and coming with suggestions on how to change that, and also holding up what is important to you about what's there now. Are you aware of any other states that have an interfaith office that have taken the Biden-Harris recommendation to that extent?
No, we should be.
Okay. And if you do learn of one from a friend who watches this, just let us know, because it's good to have those examples out there. There are going to be some changes to the paragraph about the reporting system, so I'd appreciate if you have a chance to look at that, the version that's going out today and will be made public today, and you have any additional feedback on that, that would be helpful. Are there questions from the commissioners? All right, we really appreciate your engagement. Keep in touch with us. Let us know if you have anything else. Thank you so much, and thank you as well for your flexibility. We've moved your panel a couple of times. We've even changed your panel, but I hope you feel that this was useful and certainly was helpful for us. Thank you very much. All right, we are going to take we're doing okay on time. Is it okay if we take a 5-minute recess? Great. So we have a panel coming up. We're going to take a 5-minute recess. It is now 11:38. To make sure it's a full 5 minutes, we'll come back at 11:44. Thank you.
Very few Jewish Israeli people in law enforcement. Yeah. I was involved in a department in Connecticut. There was one Jewish officer. We have none up here. There's very few chiefs that are Jewish. I can probably name them on one hand.
All right, we are back from recess, and we are welcoming Robert Mayer, Eugene Levin, and Eliana Nahoumi for a discussion on the immigrant Jewish experience, Israelis, Russian Jews, and Persian Jews in Massachusetts. Thank you so much for joining us today. And you can go in the order that you see fit.
Sure. I'll start. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Cataldo. Thank you, Commissioners, for inviting me to share the perspective of Israeli American immigrants living in Massachusetts. And thank you for your leading this commission. Okay.
Thank you.
So I just want to mention, you are the first legislator in the country to do this, and we commend you for that. And no pressure, just everybody's going to look up to you. My name is Robert Mayer. I moved from Tel Aviv to Boston 30 years ago. I'm a tech entrepreneur, the national co-chair of the ICAN, the Israeli American Civic Action Network, and a former IDF officer and Desert Storm veteran. Like many Israelis, I came here by choice, not necessity. We share common values and ambitions. I wanted to broaden my horizon, and let's be honest, enjoy a bit more space. I like to joke that here you can drive for 3 hours north and you end up in Lebanon, New Hampshire. In Israel, you end up in Beirut, Lebanon. And it's a slightly different experience. People ask, what is the difference between American Jews and Israeli Americans? And I'd like to quote Ellen Gold, the stand-up comedian, who said it best: American Jews return merchandise, Israeli return fire. Israeli have a very specific life experience. Every Israeli lived through war or terror. My first memory as a child is running to a bomb shelter during the Yom Kippur War, and my father jumping into a Patton tank to defend our country. At 18, during the first Intifada, I had a terrorist in my rifle sights. It's a growing up experience. Later, I served during the Iraqi ballistic missile attacks. We literally live the ancient line: in every generation, they rise up to destroy us. It's not a metaphor. We live it, and we felt it again on October 7th. I'd like to add maybe another thing from something that came up in my mind when I listened this morning, which was excellent. We also don't grow up with the minority mindset, which is very different. And when we come here, because we come to a country that is an ally, is a democracy, is pluralistic, we don't come with the minority mindset. We come to a country that it's great to be here. We love it here. I'd like to start about a recent visit to this building when a legislator told our Israeli American delegation, "I never thought of you as constituents or as voters." I appreciated her honesty, but that comment revealed the truth many of us feel, that Israeli Americans are part of the Commonwealth success story, yet too often ignored. This commission has done serious commendable work, and I thank you for it, sincerely. But one moment in your hearings stood out to me, when a former ambassador, speaking as a Jew, claimed that the anti-Semitism and its synonymous anti-Zionism we're seeing is really just anger at Israel's government. He called Israel's defensive war political, even as Hamas held hostages and my own family were under fire, basically dismissing democracy as its rightful existential struggle. Most of you pushed back, some did not. Israel has made some significant progress in recent months in restoring spinal injuries, but unfortunately, it has not figured out yet how to grow a backbone. That distinction between Israel and the Jews may sound academic, but for us Israelis, it's existential. It dehumanizes us. It treats my historical and ancestral homeland, Israel, not as a democracy of people, but as a symbol, something you can condemn freely because its citizens are invisible. Israel and Zionism is not an abstraction. It's our families and friends, our history, and our graves. To pretend otherwise doesn't reduce anti-Semitism, it excuses it. There are roughly 30,000 Israeli Americans living in Massachusetts alone. We are scientists, doctors, engineers, restaurateurs, small business owners. A 2016 study found that Israeli-founded companies contribute about $20 billion to the state economy. And that number has just grown since. But today, some of us quietly wonder if we have a future here. We've experienced anti-Semitism even at the workplace. Years ago, it was about Jews and money, control over the media, and one of the most intriguing to me was when I was told, I don't know what you are, but you're not white, okay? Or you're not an American. You know, it's the classic hits. But now our kids are targeted. They are called Zionists as a slur. Your parents are baby killers. Some schools teach that our homeland is colonial, when every rock or hole that is dug proves exact opposite. And when Israelis are murdered, too many ask, what did they do to provoke it? These experiences differ from those of American Jews who have lived here for generations, experienced white supremacy, and frankly, I think they were also caught completely unprepared to the new style of anti-Semitism. We carry with us the memory of war, loss, and resilience. We don't have the luxury to debate identity. We must fight to survive. Massachusetts has long been a friend to Israel, economically, culturally, but that friendship has gaps. We still have no anti-BDS statute protecting Israeli American businesses. I personally faced that as a CEO here. There's like, I think 30-something states in the country already that have anti-BDS laws. The Commonwealth Genocide Education Law, while well-intentioned, ended up being a failure as it leaves Holocaust education optional and has opened the door to politicized, inaccurate content. And we need inclusion of Israelis, Russian, Mizrahi, and Persian Jewish voices in every state initiative on anti-Semitism and Jewish inclusion. And of course, October 7th changed everything. It revealed not only a surge in anti-Semitism, but a collapse of civilized society and the loss of our moral compass. Educators and civic leaders who would condemn hatred in any other context struggled, equivocated, or even celebrated. That was not a debate about policy. It was a failure of humanity. This is not only a Jewish problem, it is a civic crisis. It exposed extreme ignorance and distorted values among our young generation. This should concern everybody and not just the Jews. It may start with us, but it never ends with us. Israeli Americans are not victims, we are contributors. We chose Massachusetts, we love this Commonwealth, we add to its economy, to its innovation, and its cultural life. But if anti-Semitism becomes unbearable, we have another home. And history shows what happens when Jews start backing. So I urge these commissions, do not separate anger at Israel from hatred of people who live there. Because for us, our family, there is no difference. And finally, please, anti-Semites have to make a choice. We are either white colonialists or hummus eaters who 2,000 years ago lived in Jerusalem and plotted to kill Jesus. At least we've established that Israelis invented hummus. And I tell you, I make the best hummus if you're interested. My friend from Abu Dhabi can attest to that. Thank you for your work, your integrity, and your commitment to protecting all families in the Commonwealth, including mine.
Thank you, Robert.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Eliana Nahoumi, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I am here representing the Persian Jewish community. Yes, Persian Jews exist, and I feel the need to clarify that because throughout my life, I've been repeatedly told by both Jews and non-Jews that I'm the first Persian Jew that they'd ever met, which is absurd to me because Jews have lived in Iran since the 6th century BCE. My mother was born in Iran before the Islamic Revolution. She fled her home in the middle of the night because life for Jews in post-revolution Iran had become unbearable. My grandfather was accused of being a spy for Israel and the United States, and he was arrested by the IRGC, tortured and imprisoned for many months. After a year, he'd become so frail from the treatment that he could no longer survive, and they put him on house arrest. And that moment allowed my mother and her family to be smuggled out of Iran. She came to the United States hoping to give her children the opportunity to grow up in an environment where they don't have to hide their identity or fear harassment for who they are. Unfortunately, that was not my reality after October 7th. I recently graduated from American University in Washington, D.C., and in the weeks following the horrific attacks in Israel, I faced accusations of genocide, direct harassment from peers, and social isolation. In my Persian language class, a classmate who I had known since the previous year stood up and screamed at me in front of everyone, claiming that my people were killing Palestinian children and that I had blood on my hands. In a state of shock, I told her that I was born in America and I happen to be Jewish, and that I don't really appreciate those anti-Semitic remarks. She dismissed me by insisting that she's not anti-Semitic, she's anti-Zionist. But how can someone accuse an American-born Jew of having blood on her hands and then claim that it has nothing to do with anti-Semitism? I also couldn't ignore the painful irony that a Muslim Iranian student, someone whose community is free to practice openly in America, felt empowered to accuse me of atrocities when my own family was forced to escape Iran because of religious persecution. That was just the first of many instances of anti-Semitism I witnessed firsthand after October 7th. And although it was deeply distressing, I can't say I was shocked, because not one person stood up for me. Not a single classmate said anything, they just sat there silently. And my professor wasn't present during that incident, but when I told her what happened, her response was neutral, essentially that we can't control other people's actions. After graduating college, I knew that I wanted to spend time in Israel, so this past summer, I participated in an internship program that was supposed to last 2 months. However, I was forced to leave after just 1 week because Iran launched thousands of missiles towards Israel, and I spent 2 sleepless nights in the bomb shelter before being evacuated to the south because a building on my block had been destroyed by missiles, by an Iranian missile. Even in the Jewish homeland, I found myself sheltering from Iranians' Islamic ballistic missiles. If there's one thing I took away from that experience is that I refuse to be silent and let those things happen and not say anything. Silence allows hatred to grow, and as long as we stay silent, nothing will change. Thank you.
Eugene?
Good morning. My name is Eugene Levin. Of course, I'd like to thank the Commission for the wonderful work you're doing and for the opportunity to speak here today.
Eugene, could you bring the
just
microphone just a little closer to you?
So it's a true honor to be here, but also a deeply painful and sad necessity to address you on a subject that I wish I never had to bring up again in my lifetime, a virus called antisemitism. It's a mutating virus that takes shapes of and adapts to the situation in society, as we know. I'm a refugee from the former Soviet Union, came to the United States in 1989 at the age of 16. I arrived here with my family, my parents, my grandparents, and we were seeking freedom. We left because Jews in USSR experienced decades and centuries of discrimination, fear, and violence and exclusion. And America was always seen as a beacon of hope for us, the place where we believed such hatred had no place. And never in my wildest dreams I could imagine that decades later I would find myself facing the same hatred once again that I believed we left behind in the USSR. I am a grandson of Holocaust survivors from both sides of my family, from Latvia and Ukraine. Entire branches of our families were exterminated. For example, my grandfather, Moses Berkovich, a sole survivor of the family, he lost 19 members of his family, and the massacre wasn't carried out by the Germans, but by the neighbors, by the Latvians. It was done before the Germans even made it to the town. In Latvia and in Lithuania, most of the Jews were murdered by not by the Germans, but by the neighbors, people who lived next to them for generations. And the legacy of the memory of Holocaust and the current day denial and distortion events in Latvia and Lithuania compelled me to produce and direct a documentary called Baltic Truth. It confronts Holocaust distortion in the Baltic states, and it's now available on Amazon Prime. October 7th came later, of course, and again the world turned against the Jews, and Jews were slaughtered because they're Jews. This past June, I ended up in Israel, and again under attack, but this time by Iran. So I was in Israel from June 6th until June 23rd. Felt every explosion in Tel Aviv and Bat Yam. Twice the impacts were within 500 yards of where we were staying. Living under the direct threat made me painfully, painfully realize how quickly the virus mutates and transforms into violence against the Jews. And it pushed me to start another documentary called Ashes of Identity about the global rise of anti-Semitism, not only in the Middle East and Europe, but unfortunately here in our backyard, in our Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It is also not theoretical for my family. After I published an article on Times of Israel condemning the Natick High School walkout for Free Palestine, my home in Dover was vandalized. Somebody actually drove by my house, took Polaroid pictures of the house, wrote, "Shame on you, Free Palestine," and they left it on my doorstep. And far worse, on August 10th, my wife was physically assaulted at Harvard Square during I call it a mob for Free Palestine. Somebody noticed her Star of David. She ended up being physically assaulted. We approached the police officers that were standing nearby. We were able to ID the individual who was standing 10 feet away from us. And there's nothing. Nothing has been done up until today by Cambridge Police. The excuse, we are too busy. We can't identify the individual, even though we identified the individual right there. It sends a chilling message to me, and I think to every Jew, is that, dear fellow Jews, we love you, but you're on your own. So this is why I'm here today. It's very uneasy, but I'm resolute, because silence is complicity, and the virus of anti-Semitism thrives when people look away. I'm grateful for your work. And I urge you to continue not just studying anti-Semitism, but to confront it, to protect Jewish students, families, and Jewish lives across the Commonwealth. And anti-Semitism is not a Jewish problem, it's a societal disease that threatens the moral fabric of every democracy. And actually, before I came here, something came to my mind. I read a quote by Napoleon Bonaparte. And Napoleon said that treatment of Jews in any country is a thermometer of its civilization. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from the commissioners or comments? Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Shikar.
I want to thank each of you for sharing just the deeply personal journeys that you've had with us, some of which really transcend what's happening in Massachusetts and what this commission may be able to do in terms of addressing anti-Semitism. But I think, at least for me, it helps inform really the experiences and the trauma that our community is facing. My specific question is, I was really struck, Eliana, by people saying to you they'd never met a Persian Jew before. Were there really Jews in Persia? It really it hit close to home for me, because I've heard the same thing about having family, my family coming from Iraq. And it made me think, in the context of what we've been hearing earlier today, about the need to share who the Jewish people are, where we're from, as being a really key component of allyship. And I wanted to put that challenge out to the three of you about how this commission might be able to build on that and build on the diversity of the Jewish community that you've so beautifully expressed, in terms of what we sort of set as our aspiration for understanding and dialogue through this report.
Thank you for this question. So there's obviously many things that we can do, and a lot of it is actually incorporated already in your report, which is excellent. If there's a couple of things that I do think would come to mind, and I think we've had these conversations in the past. One is inclusion, first of all, understanding that there is a wider community here that is not just American Jews or Ashkenazi American Jews, but there's actually a lot more. I didn't say it here, but to that delegation that I brought to the State House, I brought a Yemenite Jew, a lady, very dark-skinned, and the legislator asked her, "Are you even Jewish?" So there's a bit of gap of understanding, and I think including us more would help. Second, and I did write that in my comments to your staff, was don't refer to us just as a faith. We are an ethnicity. We are primarily an ethnicity. And when I hear a lot of I call it, thank you, sir, may I have another, Jews that we hear occasionally on these panels, is that we have to understand that there is a primarily tied in Jewish identity, Jewish as the people of Israel, not just Israelis, but the people of Israel, which are, a lot of us are here, to the land of Israel, right? I mean, when Moses went in front of the burning bush, there were two sentences that were told to him by God is, go to your people, I will free them from slavery and take them to the land, the promised land. He didn't say, I'll give you the Ten Commandments. He didn't talk about kosher food or tikkun olam. It was all about our connection to our ancestral land. And that's where identity comes primarily from. That's why we are a people and ethnicity, not just a faith. If one thing that you can fix, it's public education. Okay, it is.
Fix public education.
So yeah.
All right.
Altogether. When we came here and my daughter was born, I made the point of living in Brooklyn. I made the point of putting her through public education. I wanted the diversity. I wanted the experience of, I don't live in a bubble of Jews or Israelis. I wanted everything. Today, she's now in law school across the river, and I told her, don't you dare put your future children in public education. Go to a Jewish day school. So unless you fix it, I'm sure that you guys can do it, but it's just horrible. What we've witnessed here in one of those amazing panels that you've had, it's just disastrous.
I want to thank ICAN for sending the suggestions for the K through 12 recommendations. As you know, we incorporated many of those. With respect to what you said, which is very similar to what Warren Jacobson said earlier about how we describe the Jewish people, there have been changes made to that language already in the version that's going to be released today. We'd appreciate your feedback about how we could further improve or make more accurate that portion. With respect to the Holocaust education issue, I want to, again, thank DESE for the survey that they've done to help enlighten us on that data. Really important that we have a department that not only tries to do what it can to carry out the law, but also is helping us kind of with accuracy determine the extent to which it's being carried out. There are specific recommendations in this draft regarding Holocaust education and how we might be able to close those gaps. With respect to BDS in particular, that has been something that's been discussed to some extent on at our commission meetings. Not as much as maybe some would like, maybe more than others would like. I can tell you my personal view is that BDS measures are morally reprehensible, wrong, and probably almost always illegal under federal law. I can't tell you right now the extent to which we're going to address BDS, but I do want to raise up that there have been many, in fact, I would say most or almost all of the most prominent higher ed institutions in Massachusetts have made statements and taken actions against attempts at BDS measures. in Massachusetts already, including probably most recently, to my knowledge, University of Massachusetts Amherst. So to the extent that my colleagues and I in the legislature take further action on that, it's not likely to be, and could not actually be technically through this commission, but it's something that I know a lot of us are thinking about. So I appreciate your comments.
If I may just comment quickly on the anti-BDS. So we personally authored the bill that has passed in California years ago. It was the first, so California, under Governor Brown. Or was it Newsom? I think it was Brown. Sorry? And we actually provided a very similar version because we worded it as an anti-discrimination law, not necessarily, BDS. So it actually passes the muster of the First Amendment challenges, and I think we worked with Rep. Howitt here years ago on trying to pass it. It never got out of committee, so it didn't even get the benefit of a vote. With respect to BDS, I can tell you that personally I suffered from it. They tried to impact my business. I had to go and talk to the Undersecretary of Commerce in Washington to get it fixed. They actually launched an investigation against the perpetrator, and it helped. But to go, how many people can get access to a federal infrastructure like this?
Robert, you also mentioned at the beginning of your remarks the contributions of Jewish and Israeli Americans to Massachusetts itself.
Yeah.
And I think so often, including on things, occasions when we celebrate Jewish American Heritage Month, sometimes we overemphasize anti-Semitism. A counterexample of that was the event that the governor convened at the last Jewish American Heritage Month, and Benny Sharoni, the Consul General, made, I think, what I thought were really inspiring remarks as he went through in great detail the many contributions that Jewish Americans and Israeli Americans have had and continue to have in Massachusetts. And I think that, again, loops back to what Warren Jacobson was saying earlier. It's very important that folks understand who Jews are and how they're incorporated into our current society, and the same goes for Israelis. Speaking of Israelis, we have had some pushback from members of the public about the number of times that we include the word Israel or in Israelis in our report. That number of times will not be diminished. It would only probably be expanded in any further drafts.
Mr. Chair, can I add something? Thank all three of you for your testimony. And Mr. Levin, I sit before you as a 39-year police officer, past 13 as chief, and frankly, I'm ashamed and angered by what you and your wife had to go through. It is my hope that my work on this commission helps educate, enhance law enforcement, so we never have an encounter like that again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions and comments? Yes, Commissioner Friedman.
I want to personally thank all of you for doing this. I know it's not easy, and I think we would all agree that hearing from immigrants today, it's a finale. This is not a footnote. I have a comment and then a question for you. The comment, and this is something perhaps we can talk about in the final report, is I said in our very first meeting more than a year ago that my strong sense is that Israeli Americans have borne the biggest brunt of anti-Semitism and had the worst time. And that's awful, and I think that in many ways our community has failed, the Israeli American community. The flip side that I think we should emphasize somewhere in the report on education and otherwise is that you actually have additional legal protection that someone like me born in America doesn't, which is protection against national origin discrimination. And when people do the despicable things they've been doing to you, they're breaking federal and state law. And I think it's helpful. We don't need to pass a new law to say that. That is the law today. I think we may already say it, but we should make sure in our report to emphasize that discrimination against people because of their national origin is illegal, and people should be trained on that. That's my comment.
In the federally, as in the state level, that's what was the BDS law was national origin discrimination.
Well, thank you, and we can study. There's some proposals on State Education Law 151C, to clarify that and others. My question is actually mostly for Eugene. This is something that I don't think will be in our report, but just to educate the world, there's a lot of language and discussion today, post-October 7th, and even before that, that I believe emanates from the Soviet Union in the 1970s, when we hear Zionism is racism, anti-Zionism is anti-racism. A lot of the things that are being said on campuses by kids who weren't born in the 1970s were birthed in the 1970s by Soviet Union as propaganda. And I'm interested in hearing your perspective on that and in ideas you have to help educate people who may be well-meaning, who may think that they're helping to fight a justice fight, that actually the words they're saying are literally anti-Semitic words that were used against Jews by the Soviet Union.
Well, I grew up hearing these words. I mean, I can go back as maybe, as far as I can remember, maybe the 3rd grade in a Soviet school, where I would be singled out, and here is the Jew, and it continued up until we left, and the Jews in Soviet Union, they couldn't really do much. You could just get tough, and I would fight. Like when I got older, and then I found out that if I fight, I would be the one who would be punished, and the ones who came up to me and said, "Oh, you're a dirty Jew, and you are, this and that," they wouldn't be punished. So, how do we fight this? I mean, if I had an answer on how do we fight this, we'd probably solve the centuries-old question of anti-Semitism. I mean,
I trust you'll let us know. I trust you'll let us know.
Well, my way of starting to, I guess, fight and educate was I produced a documentary called Baltic Truth. So it started when I went to Latvia to visit the mass grave of my grandfather's family and the Jews of the town. And I was there many times. And on one of the trips in 2014, I noticed there was a new monument right next to the Jewish grave. So I walked over to take a look at it, and to my surprise, it said, "Long live Latvian national partisans, you gave your life in fight for freedom of Latvia against communist oppression." And I had nothing against it. But then I looked at the names on the gravestones. And a couple of the names, I couldn't believe they were there. So one of the names was Vilis Tunkelis, and everybody knows that he was in charge of execution of the Jews of that town. And he is buried with the honors right next to the Jews he killed. So to me, this was absolutely mind-blowing. So that little story ended up in a documentary called Baltic Truth. And I think this was my way of educating the world. Anyway, I hope I answered your question.
Commissioner Burton.
Thank you. I just want to really thank the panel and the chairs for this opportunity. I think it's really wonderful to chairs how you have made space for the diversity of the Jewish community to be heard over the course of this process over the last year. And for this panel, Rob, who I know very well, we have long conversations, the ways in which the different parts of our community and the different experiences we have, whether we're first generation or fifth generation, or in my case, I don't know, 400 years in this country, the ways in which we experience this country differently and the ways in which we experience anti-Semitism differently are really important, and I'm really glad that we have made the space to lift it up. And so I really just want to thank this panel for sharing your perspectives and your experiences, which I know are different from those of some of this panel's members who are Jewish or from other members of our Jewish community. And we have a responsibility to every part of our Jewish community in the course of this process. I do want to just name something because we're reaching the end of the process. We only have one more hearing, because I heard something that concerned me, and I don't want to take it into the final report. My colleague made reference to the possibility that maybe Israeli Americans experience anti-Semitism worse than all other Jews, or than most other Jews. And I think it behooves us to be careful in the competitive who experiences anti-Semitism worse within the Jewish community. And without in any way diminishing and fully respecting the unique and particular experiences of Israeli Americans that experience anti-Semitism, which I recognize and want to affirm, we have heard over the course of the year from others, and I think the chairs have done a really excellent job of naming that competitiveness in this space is not productive. We have had panelists in the past who've come in who tried to pit anti-Jewish racism as less important than other kinds, and the chairs have rightly pushed back on that. And we have also heard from presenters in public testimony and in panels who have spoken to the particular experiences of other parts of the Jewish community, not only the immigrant communities. For example, we have heard testimony from those who talked about Orthodox kids who've been chased and harassed in the streets because they wear, visibly Orthodox garments. We have heard from progressive Jews who are secular and fifth-generation American who've been chased out of certain progressive spaces because of the politics of that, frankly, some of the earlier panels heard today. So I just want to be very cautious and just say that all the ways in which all parts of the Jewish community experience anti-Semitism are a problem, and all of them are valued and appreciated by this commission, fully appreciating as well what has been presented to us today. So thank you.
Thank you. And one thing, there may be another question, but one thing, Robert, is the commission will speak through its final report. There have been times when I've vigorously disagreed with something that someone has said on a panel and have responded, as you've seen, and there have been other times that I have not. There have been other times that I've let others respond in a way that I would do myself. And then there have been other times when no one has responded, and that's been okay too. And there have been times when someone said something that I think I really agree with, and I don't say anything at all. We do have somebody online. Commissioner Blanter, online.
Yes, thank you. I just have a comment, particularly for Robert, who mentioned that there are no people coming out of other countries on the commission. That's not the case. I come from the same place as Eugene, former Soviet Union, and I just wanted to make the record, tell you that that experience here in the commission has been formative for me and incredibly important. And it's sometimes painful because some of the opinions that have been expressed during panels have been very different from mine. As a person coming from a former communist country, they were very difficult to hear. And Eugene, I watched your documentary and I just wanted to tell you how impressed I was. I'm sure it was very painful and difficult to speak, and the emotion is obvious, and I just wanted to thank you. That's all I have to say.
I think we have, Commissioner, I think we have time for one more question. Commissioner Friedman?
I just had a very brief comment. So I want to thank Commissioner Burton because you did reframe what I meant to say. I certainly don't mean to diminish the experience of any person. And you put it well. We experience anti-Semitism differently. When I hear the word intifada, I have my own interpretation, but I didn't live through an intifada. I didn't live being faced during an intifada by violence, or during an intifada having someone find the skull of a close friend. And that's what intifada means. And part of the report makes clear that when people have their own experiences, as in any other kind of discrimination, we credit their lived experience. We don't say, oh, you shouldn't listen to that word that way. You hear it wrong. We should credit it. And just clarification, I did check. Chapter 151B does prohibit discrimination based on national origin with respect to workplace, housing, and many other aspects. It's not an anti-BDS law, and there's other things that would do. But Massachusetts law does currently forbid lots of kinds of national origin discrimination, so we should remind the world of that.
Thank you so much, and we really appreciate your contributions.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to go online now. We have 2 speakers left. The next is Alice Nderitu, the former United States United Nations Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide. In her remarks, will discuss a global approach to confronting anti-Semitism and educating on lessons from the Holocaust. Alice, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have some slides to share, and I don't know whether they could be shared from. Yes, thank you.
Looks like that's working already.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. And I'll speak to these few slides first. I really appreciate your having invited to come and speak. And I will go to the first slide immediately. As you've mentioned, I worked as a special advisor for the prevention of genocide with a global mandate. And so this first slide doesn't say anything anybody in the room would not know, but it just serves to show that I understand the depth of what we are dealing with, how far back it goes, and how it keeps recreating itself in different ways, and how it keeps finding a home, anti-Semitism, that is. Either it's on religion, and then it moves to race, and then it actually justifies and the killing of Jewish people in different ways, and that we know that this has gone on for centuries. And so I truly understand that we have a lot of work to do, and that it may not be the case that we could be able to end anti-Semitism, but that there's so much that can be done, and I'll tell you in what ways this can be done. So in this presentation, I'll focus on the last aspect of this PowerPoint, where I'm talking about the way anti-Semitism manifests itself today with the far right, far left, radical Islamist ideology, Holocaust denial and distortion, and of course spread across social media in ways that it's never been spread before. So please, next slide. So with this slide, I taught at some point at the SIT Graduate Institute. We used to be in Brattleboro in Vermont, and so we created this cycle of socialization. And you can just click on it because so much of it will keep coming up. And it speaks to when do we stop stereotypes and prejudices. So just please click on it. If you keep clicking, then the whole picture will appear. It's a whole, yeah. So it speaks to stages in human life when we can have an impact on the way that we can address anti-Semitism and also stereotypes and prejudices, because anti-Semitism is fed through stereotypes and prejudices. And so, of course, we know that in the early years, that the influence is coming from the family, it's coming from the stereotypes and prejudices, the playground, and then we move on where the socialization then continues, and then the child now gets into school and they gets exposed to education, media, social media, and the kind of things political leaders are saying, or what religious leaders are saying in various religious establishments. And then also the separation from the group, how somebody begins to get separated, and then how then people begin to internalize at a young age this kind of stereotypes and prejudices and fear other people, and then they get to the point where they participate in dominant beliefs, and then of course the circle continues if nobody interrupts it. So the presentation that I'm going to speak to will speak about these interruptions, where they can happen and in which way they can happen. Please, the next slide. So when I joined the UN in 2020, I joined and I was heading an office that was actually founded on the basis of the Holocaust, because this office, the Office of the Prevention of Genocide, the word genocide itself was created by a Polish Jewish lawyer, and it was him who led the signing of the convention, the first convention that the UN ever adopted, the Convention on the Prevention of Genocide. And he reflected not just on what had happened to the Jewish community, because even by the time he created the word genocide, he hadn't lost 49 members of his own family to the Holocaust. He was talking about the Armenians, he was talking about going far, the Carthaginians, all these people who've been killed. And so I was very conscious of what history had handed to me, that I needed to do something very remarkable with this office. And so we put together this in partnership with an organization called the Jacob Blumstein Institute. We put together this document called Combating Holocaust and Genocide Denial, Protecting Survivors, Preserving Memory and Promoting Prevention. And a copy, a link will be in the presentation. And it became the first UN document to acknowledge the International Holocaust Remembrance Association definition of anti-Semitism in full. It continues to be the only UN document, actually, that acknowledges the IHRA definition in full. And it's so important that we grasp that if the UN itself is founded on the ashes of the Holocaust, and the UN itself does not accept this definition, the IHRA definition in full, not in part, that then we then have a very big problem, and we need to get as many international bodies as possible, and regional bodies, the European Union, the African Union, to accept the IHRA definition. Because denial or silence, as I used to keep emphasizing, will lead us to another Holocaust. And I found a very active group of Holocaust deniers within the system. So Raphael Lemkin himself appeared nowhere in the UN. And but also when I went to the ground, I went to Bosnia-Herzegovina, and I found that in Bosnia-Herzegovina, the genocide deniers of the Srebrenica genocide actually invite Holocaust deniers. So actually, Holocaust denial has given a template for the denial of the Srebrenica genocide and for the denial of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. So then, thinking about how I myself learned about all this, the lessons from the Holocaust, the first film I watched called Escape to Sobibor, and thinking about how powerful it is when we teach about the Holocaust, and that since October 7th, when there's been all this shutting down of spaces where people are speaking about the Holocaust, that we cannot relent. We must keep teaching what happened to the Holocaust. It's so what happened during the Holocaust. It's so important as a foundation of understanding anti-Semitism, and we shouldn't give up. And in so many spaces, like where I come from, like in Africa, there's a very huge group of people who are so supportive and who understand anti-Semitism. So this then, having this experience means, and across different countries, it means that we will then be able to have laid the proper foundation for working on Holocaust denial. And there's some countries that have developed very good legislation on Holocaust denial, especially in Europe. And so there is so much that can be done in terms of taking that experience to other contexts. Please, the next slide.
Could we have the next slide?
So, yes, we have the next slide. So in terms of working with sport, while I was also in this UN office on prevention of genocide, we partnered with sports teams, sports leagues, the Boston Red Sox, Liverpool Football Club, and major US leagues, the NFL, NBA, NHL, NBL, NASCAR, and FIFA, on this global campaign to counter hate and hate speech. And we launched a policy document at the United Nations, which we call the game plan, and a copy is there. And I cannot, I cannot even begin to explain the power that the sports community has to transform the fight against anti-Semitism into this global movement. Many people do not know that, but for people like us who work on the global agendas, for India and Pakistan, we get a lot done when we have the World Cup, the World Cricket Cup going on. In many parts of the world, when the World Cup for football is going on, we are actually able to get negotiations in place. So we actually time our negotiations so that when the World Cup begins, because people can speak to each other at that particular time, then we are able to make a lot of movement. But we do know that sports transcends borders. We do know that people from different divides follow sports. And we also know that many people, including those who are perpetrators of the worst violence possible, follow sports teams. So we need to do a lot of work with sports. It provides a very neutral space to have conversations. We have many examples that I cannot go into right now of how this works. But also, we do know that like sports communities are very organized. They have all these programs, they have all these social responsibility commitments, they have spaces in which we can get in and speak about anti-Semitism. They have, they run, I remember the big campaign on anti-racism that was run by football teams, and we can run something similar. And I think the world is just in that space of what to say about anti-Semitism. What do we need to move on in terms of anti-Semitism? Please, the next slide. And so when we, of course, across digital spaces, we've received the biggest challenge, the stereotyping and prejudice against Jewish communities that was seen like during the Second World War. Has multiplied because of digital environments. And each time when you speak about digital environments, I always remind people that when the stereotyping and prejudice was being done by Hitler, when Hitler appointed a minister for propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, he didn't have social media, but he really understood why it's important for him to use this propaganda. And so I have worked very successfully in many spaces, using the same tools that perpetrators use, using the same tools against them. And so thinking about a global media literacy intelligence hub that focuses on how anti-Semitic ideology is created and focusing on how it's happening. And then so that then we can be able to design an early response for it globally. And then, of course, that speaks to a global education program on the Holocaust, just like I've spoken about in the previous slide. And then a global network of digital responders. And then the way people organize, for example, for political campaigns to run political, when they're running for president or any positions, like working that way with digital responders, people who have ideas to put out. And then thinking about a very responsive advertising campaign, so that then we provide solutions to prevent all this radicalization, because there's been so much one-way information coming in, and we need to respond. And so I've given an example of an interfaith approach, because I also worked globally with religious communities. They are very organized. They have spaces in which when you are agreed on, they can pass messages quite efficiently. So they, like with the mosques, the Muslim communities, we used to work to draft a Friday bulletin that is sent globally. We did the same thing with the Catholic Church. We would work with the Vatican to see what kind of message the Pope would be putting out that could be read in all churches globally. So there is actually so much that can be done on anti-Semitism within these spaces. And it's also very powerful when you see these people sitting together, the interfaiths. We did a lot of work with the interfaiths in the Balkans. They continue to be the people that we've held everything together, and in other spaces as well. So, but they need so much information. They need to lots of social media literacy. They need to be taught. So because when they speak from a position of authority and people listen to them. So we need to give them quite a bit of information. Please, the next slide. So now, thinking about all this, I think that there is that space that needs to be occupied by empowering non-Jewish allies, and thinking about somebody like myself, but also my input is actually negligible when compared to many other people. As we speak right now, I'm working with the Smith brothers, who are from the UK, Methodist background, Christian background. They visited Israel when they were young, and they went to Yad Vashem, and they came back and began asking their parents, why doesn't the UK have a Holocaust museum like Yad Vashem? And they ended up creating the first Holocaust museum that actually became, it's now the UK's National Holocaust Museum in their own home. So they gathered Holocaust survivors, and at that time, nobody was speaking about the Holocaust in the UK. So the Smith brothers are a very powerful example. I also have a good friend in the UK as well. Her name is Nimko Ali. She's a Muslim woman. If you Google Nimko Ali, you'll see the powerful things she says. She speaks for Jewish communities all the time, and she's not afraid. Her brother also issued a statement where he called Hamas a cancer. So there are so many people out there. And, I feel that what has happened since October 7 is a huge bullying, community bullying of anybody who would be pro-Jewish, including the allies. And we haven't responded to this bullying, but we need to empower those who are trying to respond to this bullying. So I have this whole list of things that we could do, working together with allies, and even teaching about, like when I speak to South Africans, I ask them, do you remember that when Nelson Mandela was aligned in his trial, in the Rwanda trial, that those who were aligned with him, 3 of them were Jewish. And actually those sentenced to death was Nelson Mandela and a Jewish man. And how strong the Jewish community was in supporting the anti-apartheid, the pushback against apartheid. And so there's lots that people do not know. So I know that there is like information that people don't have. And like, for example, my mother had asked me one day, like she said, I need to respond to people who say these kind of things, like in the WhatsApp groups I am on. And I created for her frequently asked questions, like such basic things to support non-Jewish allies. So if we can find them, and I know quite a number of non-Jewish allies, and who are very powerful, who have a voice, if we support them, then we can be able to take this war, I'll call it a war against anti-Semitism globally. So I will not read all this. So please, the next point. The next slide, sorry. So when I was reading the background documents, I saw that this commission wants to work with the Commonwealth. And as somebody who comes from a Commonwealth country, Kenya, so I really understand how the Commonwealth works. I have been a recipient of Commonwealth scholarships, and so I do know how it works. And just last week, I was in London, and I had a meeting with the president of the Commonwealth Jewish Council, Lord Mendelsohn, who is Jewish, and we spoke about what we can do together. And so I've already reached out to him and told him that I'm making this presentation to you. And I told him there's actually already an opportunity for the Commonwealth Jewish Council to collaborate with this commission. And so there is so much that gets done in the Commonwealth. It's very organized, and we can organize through the Commonwealth all the interfaith meetings that I was speaking about. We can also organize Holocaust exhibitions and Holocaust education to travel throughout the Commonwealth. I'm a member of the Commonwealth Women Mediators program. I am a member of so many parts of the Commonwealth. So as soon as I saw the word Commonwealth, it jumped out at me because there's so much that happens in that space. And I thought it's extremely important. I've found it very powerful when people travel together to Auschwitz, and then they go to Cambodia, and then they go to the Kigali Genocide Memorial. So if you get people with very large constituency to travel together, they bond, and then whatever they say together, like for example, an interfaith group, then becomes extremely powerful. So the Commonwealth has this very huge meeting that happens every so often. And the next one is happening in 2026 in St. John's, Antigua and Barbuda. And we can work with the president of the Commonwealth Jewish Council so that anti-Semitism becomes an agenda. And it wouldn't be a new thing because anti-racism has been an agenda of the Commonwealth. So anti-Semitism being an agenda would not be something that we shouldn't imagine that cannot happen. So if we support Holocaust memorial events in the Commonwealth, it means that every January 27th, we will be having the same conversation around the Commonwealth. So in this presentation, what I really want to pass across is that the Jewish community, there are a lot of people around the world who know what happened to the Jewish community, what continues to happen to the Jewish community, what happened on October 7th, and who feel that conscience that they need to support the Jewish community to speak up for themselves and to also work on anti-Semitism. So I will stop here, and I have a few minutes for questions. Unfortunately, I have to rush to the airport, and so I can't take very long. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Enderitu. Really enlightening, and we will post your presentation on our meeting materials, so everybody, all the commissioners and the public will have the benefit of that. You tell us when you have to go. I'm going to open it up for questions, but when you have to go, you have to go. Thank you again so much for fitting in the time. Are there any questions from members of the commission? Commissioner Freeman?
Thank you, Alice. And I want to say she is an incredibly courageous leader globally who spent her entire career trying to prevent genocide all over the world, particularly in Africa. We don't have time now, but if you Google her and see the courage she showed at the UN, it's really remarkable. My question, Alice, is about language. And as we do all the work you talked about, the importance of words and the power of words, but also the injury caused by words, loaded words like apartheid and genocide. And if you could talk a little bit about how we think about language in the context of hate.
The context of especially the word genocide, and considering all the work we've done on hate speech and countering hate speech, we know, if I could speak specifically to the word genocide, how it's been instrumentalized and politicized, so that when we are speaking about, when people say like genocide in Gaza, which was actually one of the main issues that I used to put across in the UN, is that when people say that, they forget the definition of the word genocide, the legal definition, what it speaks to, and also the issue of the intent it speaks to. And I always remind people that there exists a charter, a Hamas charter, that declares the intention to destroy all the Jews in the world and Israel as well. And for the many years I worked in the UN, we used to flag it as one of the key issues, one of the key early warnings of anything that could happen. So what we then have seen is the politicization of these words. We've seen the politicization of the words genocide, of the words settler colonialism, which is designed to speak to people from the global south, because the colonialism is such a big issue in the global south, and people still feel the effects. We still have people who are alive during colonialism. So then as soon as that then is placed as one of the issues that people need to be speaking to, then people immediately think, oh, if they are being colonized, then there is a problem there. So much of it is about the lack of information. I find huge amounts of lack of information. As my mother was asking me, how can I respond to this? How do I respond to this? That we need to do a frequently asked questions to distribute that would also speak about the power of words, would also speak about hate and how stereotypes and prejudices develop into actual hate that gets people to dehumanize people and kill them. So there's a huge amount of work to be done around the power of words and how that translates into hate.
Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Learned a tremendous amount from listening to you, and I'm not sure my question is entirely pertinent to the work of the Commission, but perhaps it is. In listening to you, you've talked about the opportunity to build allyship. And candidly, especially since 10/7, the conversation among many in the Jewish community has been about the loss of allies and the exclusion from communities where people used to be active, and the painful loss that is. We're talking today a little bit about interfaith exchanges and the important need for dialogue and creating spaces where that can happen, which of course is critical. But do you have a sense of, we're here in Massachusetts, do you have a sense of best practices for people who are interested in finding kindred spirits, people who are open to dialogue, people who are open to solidarity, people who are open to the Jewish reality and the Jewish experience?
Yes, we do. And right now, I'm working very closely with the UK Jewish community. We have a WhatsApp group. We keep bringing in allies, like globally. We keep identifying what allies want to say and how they can say it. And there's been a lot of pushback, and but at the same time, we see huge amounts of progress from a time when last year and the year before, there didn't seem to be any allies for the Jewish community in the world. So I would like to introduce this commission and yourself to the UK Jewish community and the allies, how we work together. We have a meeting every Monday where we get somebody to come and speak to us. So I have spoken to the team. So it's a very huge group of people. So Jewish people and also allies. And then we map what we need to do going forward. So like last week, we had one of the hostages, Eli Sharabi, the one he wrote this book called Hostage. He came and spoke to us. And so there's quite a bit that is going on there. There's quite a bit of organizing that's going on there. We have religious leaders in there. We have media. We have social media leaders in there. We have quite a lot of people in there. And so, which is why when I saw the Commonwealth, I told them somebody is thinking about the Commonwealth. So this can actually become bigger than it is right now. So I'll be very happy to introduce that team to you.
Thank you very much. I accept.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Enderitu, thank you so much. We wish you a safe flight. We appreciate your contributions to the Commission today. Thank you.
Thank you very much and for having me. Thank you.
We are going to move on to our next speaker in one moment. We're just going to recess for 1 minute, and then we're going to go to Andrea Silbert. Thank you. All right, we are coming back to order. If folks could take their seats and pause their conversations. And it's my pleasure to welcome our last speaker of today. You may be the last speaker.
Yes, I understand
for this
that.
special commission.
Thank you.
We may have a special guest at our next meeting. Barring that, you're either our last or penultimate speaker.
Okay,
So thank you so much, Andrea Silbert, who is going to be discussing what it takes to combat anti-Semitism in K-12 education, a parent's perspective. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Chairman Cataldo and members of this commission. I'm honored to present to you and thank you for the incredible amount of time and dedication you've put into the many hearings and research over the past year. I read the report twice and applaud you on the achievement. Originally, when I had been speaking to several of you and my friend Commissioner Friedman about testifying, I was asked to talk about the work that I've done with friends, some through the foundation, the EOS Foundation, around building allyship, and particularly around building Jewish allies. I have so much to say to you, and I understand the 10 minutes, so I don't know whether I will get to that. I hope in the Q&A, perhaps I do, because I have a lot of best practices to share. But when it came down to it, I decided to talk about my personal experiences and those of my children with anti-Semitism. And I just want you to know, I know many of you, and people think I'm quite a formidable force, but I'm just a mom and a human being, and this is going to be really hard for me. And I've spoken in front of thousands of people without problem. But every time I tell my stories, there's a little bit of trauma. And it's worth it because it's so important. And I have shared with so many people who I have thought were friends and allies what my children have experienced since 10/7 and even before, and been told that I am exaggerating. I have experienced so much traumatic invalidation and gaslighting that it was really hard for me to pull this together. Because I could teach, frankly, a college seminar on it. So with that, forgive me that I'm going to read through it so that I can get through it. My name is Andrea Silbert. I grew up in Brookline and have lived for the past 25 years in Harwich, where I raised 3 children. I've spent most of my career in the economic and social justice sector, bringing my business skills to bear to help women and people of color use entrepreneurship to break the cycle of poverty. I founded the Center for Women in Enterprise in 1995 in Roxbury and expanded it to Worcester and Providence. CWE is now one of the largest entrepreneurial training organizations in New England. In 2007, I joined the EOS Foundation, and I have worked for the past 18 years on combating hunger in Massachusetts and promoting gender and racial justice. I never thought I would find myself in front of you and just about every friend and colleague over the past 2 years that would listen to ask you for your help to protect my family and community during this frightening time of anti-Jewish racism, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, and Jew hatred. My children attended Harwich Elementary School and Nauset Regional High School. Over the course of their elementary, secondary, and higher education, each of them experienced taunting or harassment because they are Jewish and/or identify as Zionists. By Zionists, we mean that we believe the Jewish people have a right to self-determination in our ancestral homeland of Israel. In other words, the vast majority of Jews believe the existence of Israel is an essential part of their identity. In other words, being a Zionist is intrinsic to my Jewish identity. My family is not religious, not very religious, but we go on the high holidays. But that is in no way dulls our commitment to Israel and our people. We think of ourselves as a people and a community. We are not only Zionists, we are proud Zionists. Words can't express how proud I am that after more than 2,000 years of persecution and since the diaspora and the extermination of 1/3 of our entire Jewish worldwide population, we have our own state in Israel. We are safe and free at last. The existence of Israel is existential for me. I grew up in the shadow of the Holocaust and always knew that if it should happen again, my family and I could emigrate to Israel rather than be slaughtered in our home countries. One of my earliest memories as a child is from the Yom Kippur War of 1973, when I walked in on my father watching the news on TV. He was nearly catatonic, holding his hand in his head and shaking his head and saying, "Andrea, it's all going to end. They will wipe us all into the sea." Yes, that was their rallying cry then, and the origin of the current chant, quote, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." Whether students chanting this phrase on high school and college campuses know it or not, it is a call to exterminate the Jews of Israel. And yes, it is anti-Semitic and extremely scary for my children and other Jews to hear, because we know the origin. So my first recommendation to you is to add data and more precision to the preface where you discuss that many Jews consider themselves Zionists while others do not. The vast majority of Jews believe that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state. According to a poll conducted by the Jewish Federations of North America in November 2023, 91% of American Jews say that Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish state. In that poll, in addition, 76% of the general population agreed, and only 13% of all Americans and only 4% of American Jews said it does not. The rest said they were unsure and did not know. I've got this poll, I've got everything also with footnotes and links, so I have this poll to share with you, and I'll submit it with my testimony. Another study by the Pew Foundation in 2021 found a large majority of US Jews, 82%, said caring about Israel is either essential or important to what being Jewish means to them. Since 10/7/2023, another Pew poll found an increase among young Jews in their connection to Israel. My second recommendation is that you add a few paragraphs to explain what Zionism means and how it has been hijacked as a slur. We did a training for my team at the EOS Foundation with Project Shema. I understand you heard from Oren earlier today. A young staff member asked me if she was allowed to use the word Zionist because she thought it was a racial slur against the Jewish people. It is critical that we educate our young people, and all Jews and non-Jews alike, to understand that Zionist is not a slur, and we as Zionists should not be discriminated against, sent back to Israel or the gas chambers, as has been suggested. It is essential that the great work of this committee and the report and follow-up procedures, laws, and policies help the Jewish community reclaim the name and self-identity as Zionists as a point of pride. I'm going to emphasize that. For me, that is so important, to think that when I pass on, my children and their children will be proud Zionists. Going back to my children, I'd like to mention a few of the examples of the anti-Semitism they faced pre-October 7th. You've had a lot of people talk about post-October 7th, but there was so much already going on long before that it popped and became normalized on October 7th. In the 3rd grade, someone left a book with photos of the Nazi gas oven open on my youngest son's desk. My older son's friends would see a penny, and these were his friends, and they are his friends still to this day, would see a penny on the ground and tell him to pick it up because he was Jewish. In April 2022, when my youngest son, Ben, was a junior at Nauset Regional High School, he was subjected to an anti-Semitic incident by another player on his baseball team. The coach witnessed the altercation but did not intervene, leaving the students to separate the two boys themselves as the situation escalated. I reported the incident to the principal and to the Anti-Defamation League, in fact, to Peggy Shukur, Commissioner Shukur, who's here on the commission. We were deeply dissatisfied with how the school handled the matter, which ultimately put my son at greater risk. Out of concern that escalating the issue to the superintendent would jeopardize future recommendations or college scholarships, many of which are decided by the principal, we chose not to pursue it further. Instead, my son decided to withdraw from the baseball team the following year. Despite these incidents, overall, my kids and I were very happy with their experience growing up on the Cape and with Nauset High School. Some might call these incidents microaggressions. I don't use the term because I think it means different things to different people. To me, however small or large, incidents of prejudice against Jews, Israelis, and/or Zionists are all unacceptable bias and must be addressed through proactive and comprehensive training of administrators and school teachers. I feel schools have done a good job of educating administrators and teachers about racial, gender, and anti-LGBTQ bias, and now must double down and follow those same policies and procedures to change the culture in our classrooms. Change the culture. That's what's essential. The culture permits ignorance and false narratives, as we've seen in some of the propaganda that has been put forth by the Massachusetts Teachers Union, which I have Teachers Association with me. These false narratives propel anti-Semitism. We are never going to be able to stop incidents of bias, hate, and abuse of someone's civil rights. But what we can do is know how to respond to it. And some schools respond better than others, noting the prior testimony from, I think it was the Concord School District, the superintendent. In December 2024, I was conducting research on best practices for combating anti-Semitism in high schools and found an article in the Provincetown Independent about a terrible series of incidents of anti-Semitic bullying that took place at Nauset High School in school year 2018-2019. I've given you some materials in a timeline. I know it may be confusing. So my son had the experience in 2022. I knew nothing about what had happened in school year 2018-2019, which resulted in a settlement with the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights in 2021. I was shocked to realize that this was 1 year before Ben's incident, my son Ben's incident. The case involved a young woman, Mia Rubenstein, who I've spoken to and has said that she was happy for me to offer this story. Mia endured persistent anti-Semitic harassment over the course of her entire freshman year and had to withdraw and repeat the year in a private school. Reading about her case was deeply unsettling. I had 2 children in the Nauset school during the period that this was happening to her and was unaware that such serious incidents had occurred or that the district had been required to take corrective action. Even after the OCR settlement, parents were not informed and no measures were publicly communicated to ensure the anti-Semitic bullying would be prevented in the future. In the fall of her freshman year, one of Mia Rubenstein's teachers was taking attendance and called out her name and said, "Are you Jewish? And if so, come see me after class." After class, he told her that he had a swastika tattoo on his back and asked if she would like to see it. The taunting and torment continued throughout the year, with not only the teacher, but other students joining in. Even after she left Nauset High School, which is in May, she put up with this, and her parents kept talking to the school principal and administrators, and they kept saying they didn't have any proof or they didn't see it. They kept minimizing it. She's too sensitive. Even after this, she stayed in that school till May, at which point she contacted ADL and she dropped out and had to repeat her freshman year at Suffield Academy in Rhode Island. And even then, when she withdrew in September of the following year, those students were sending her texts and anti-Semitic social media posts. The harassment continued. This was a clear case of a hate crime. I encourage you to watch Mia's public video describing her experience, which I've attached to my testimony. It's on YouTube. Mia enrolled at a private school and is now a student at Tufts. In fact, this video is inspiring, as Mia is able to tell her story and proudly shares it publicly. I also suggest you read the attached summary and timeline, along with the article in the Provincetown Independent and the OCR settlement document. Those are here. I sent those to you in advance. What is critical to the work and recommendations of this commission and future work by DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, is to understand that even after the Nauset School District entered into the federal settlement, and despite the incident involving my son occurring a year later, there was no acknowledgement from school leaders and no meaningful change to policy or practice around anti-Semitism that I am aware of. I never heard them once. In all the time my children were there, which I had 3, it was over the course of 8 years, I never heard them once discuss any issues, any incidents of anti-Semitism, although there were many. There were swastikas, there were others I haven't shared with you. So this case, I share it with you today because it's a test case for the recommendations and potential legislative actions that will come out of the commission's work. Today, I would doubt that at the federal level there are many, if any, resources left to pursue cases like Mia Rubenstein. And even under the past administration, while the case was investigated and settled by OCR, there was no enforcement. They were supposed to do all these things, and to this day, I don't know if they have. I'd really like to see someone from DESE or elsewhere from the administration follow up today with the Nauset District based on this testimony and ask what changes have been made. Perhaps we can discuss this. What sort of position or positions and resources should be created at DESE or the Executive Office of Education or the AG's office to make sure that future settlements are enforced and result in change. For my part, I believe that DESE, the AG's office, and the local DA should all be working systematically with ADL from the beginning with incidents like what happened to Mia Rubenstein. Nearly every Jewish person is going to turn to ADL in Massachusetts when a school fails them. They are step one because we trust them and our experience have been minimized when we go directly to the school districts. So what I'm suggesting is that there's a link between ADL where we go to report it. I went to report my sons. I know the Rubensteins, that's the only step they took to report it. And I will say that now when other families come to me with these sorts of incidents, which happens, I say, I think you're just going to have to file against the district a legal case because nothing happens, right? So if you don't report it as a hate crime to the police, to the DA, I don't know that anything's going to change. So my question to you all is how can we avoid that? I don't think that's the best solution is suing a district, but I think it's going to happen when we find out that there's never any change. We tell ADL's there for us, but then there's just, it doesn't result in the follow-up that we would expect to keep our civil rights protected. Now I'd like to take a minute to talk about my daughter's experience in college. My daughter, also named Mia, enrolled at Harvard College in September of 2020. She was extremely happy there, socially and academically. However, from the beginning, she was disturbed by the number of classmates who didn't want to be friends with a Zionist because it would cause them social harm. Mia is a strong girl, and she just ignored them. Wearing a Star of David on campus at that time was a risk because the groups that had the displays against Israel at the Science Center would taunt anyone who they knew was Jewish. I later learned that even back then, Israelis and Zionists were generally not going to be accepted at many of the elite finals clubs. There's prestigious social clubs that students join. So this was all pre-October 7th. The next year, my daughter called in distress to tell me that the student newspaper had endorsed the boycott, divest, and sanction movement. At that point, that was 2022, I said there's something going on, and I started following many of the newsletters that I assume many of us get each day. I learned that anti-Israel and anti-Zionist activity was taking place all over schools in the Northeast and elsewhere. I took a deep dive into this. One of the first incidents I read about in 2022 was about the group Students for Justice in Palestine at Tufts University. In an editorial published in the school newspaper, SJP declared support for, quote, the full range of Palestinian resistance against settler colonialism, end quote, calling for a boycott of all Jewish groups on campus, and even those that were not explicitly Jewish, but had Jewish leadership. The boycott forced Jewish students to renounce their Zionism in order to be accepted on campus, implying that there were, quote, good and, quote, bad Jews in an attempt to divide the Jewish community at Tufts. They emailed all Jewish students on campus to ask them to disavow Israel and Zionism. I have attached this article to my testimony.
And Andrea, we're just about at almost 20 minutes, so
sorry.
I just want to try to be as consistent as possible.
Oh,
and we
very
need
sorry.
to,
Okay.
Wrap up soon. I know there are going to be some questions, but
Yes, okay. My third main recommendation is that the report make clear, perhaps in the preface, that systemic anti-Semitism was actually pervasive, if somewhat under the radar, long before the massacres of October 7th, 2023. Systemic because on many campuses there were organized student groups and even some faculty like SJP. In fact, it was a concerted effort by the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas to infiltrate these campuses decades ago so that students learned a false narrative about Jews and Israel and called for its destruction. The explosion of anti-Semitism did not pop up randomly on 10/7 because of the war. In fact, there had been a very deliberate and successful effort led originally by the Muslim Brotherhood going back to the 1960s to delegitimize Israel's right to exist, and began by infiltrating college campuses as far back as the 80s. This then turned into the boycott, divest, and sanction movement. The BDS movement has and continues to be the primary tool used as a justification for discriminating against Jewish students on campus. My fourth recommendation is that the Commission recommend further work to consider regulatory and legislative solutions to consider best practices to prevent the BDS movement from violating the civil rights of Jews, Israelis, and Zionists on campus. I encourage you to review the Georgetown University's program on extremism's report, Hamas Influence on Campus, a study of network strategies and ideology, 2024. I've given a summary of it as well. My fifth and final recommendation is to add a section to the report on the origins of the movement to foment anti-Semitism by delegitimizing Israel and Zionists on campus and among progressive groups. In one of the past committee meetings, a commissioner asked why so many on campus turned against Israel and Jewish students as soon as the massacre happened. The answer is that national groups like SJP had already organized the students prior to the attack. At Harvard, the Palestinian Solidarity Committee had issued its statement, quote, holding Israel solely accountable for the massacre while bodies were still smoldering in the kibbutzim in southern Israel. My daughter and other Jewish students found out about the massacre from the PSC propaganda announcement.
And Andrea,
Okay.
So there's going to be some, I think, some commissioner questions.
Sure.
And I have to be fair here.
Okay.
So are there any,
thank you
yep.
very much.
Okay. Thank you. Stay right there.
Okay.
Are there questions from members of the commission?
I'm going to ask sort of a question, and it's a comment. We've worked obviously together for a long time, both on incidents and allyship. I want to go back to, the point about reporting and about how a parent and a family reports a school-based incident. And really the best practice is, while ADL can assist and ADL will count incidents, going direct to the school from, for the family to do that directly is really the better practice, and with I am hoping that the additional attention to education and knowledge about what anti-Semitism is and best practices on how schools should respond. The future incidents, because there will always be future incidents, will be handled, I think, in a more a way that's more satisfactory and helps build the school culture that you spoke about. So I just don't want people to take away that they shouldn't go directly to the school, because I think we should start from a place of expecting that the school's going to respond appropriately, especially with the enhancements that make up the body of the recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say that I went to the school first. I mean, yeah. So I agree.
As a general rule.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love, that would be the vision, to get to a place where you went to the school and they took it seriously. But in the case that they don't, the question is for you then. When the school doesn't, then what do we do?
Other commissioner questions? I want to just go ahead, Commissioner.
No, go ahead.
I just want to note and thank DA Tucker, Chief Fowler, other members and leaders in the law enforcement community for doing such a good job of partnering with the ADL and other similar organizations to make sure that there is that kind of dynamic relationship between these groups and law enforcement in particular. We've heard quite a bit of that. You've given us something to think about in terms of education. Speaking of education, I want to lift up remarks from Commissioner Martinez when he came in and he talked about his thought process in terms of personnel at DESE. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but we are going to have a finding and recommendation related to his remarks in that respect. And Commissioner Hashimoto Martel, if you have anything else to say about that.
Yeah, I can just add to that, and good to see you again. I just want to also, yes, reaffirm that, DESE's current commissioner and the agency is fully committed to combating anti-Semitism in schools and districts across the state, and this is the examples that you shared, really really do not shine in the way that we would want our schools to be for any student, and so trying to really be committed to a safe learning environment for all students. So those are hard to hear and important to hear in this work, and I'm hopeful that a lot of these recommendations will help to strengthen our ability as the department to hold some accountability across the state, as well as I think what I hear, and this is also just maybe for us to think about as the commission, is around the interconnectedness of information sharing. I think when I hear about how things are currently reported and where they're reported to, I don't think it all is shared in the most effective way, so that DESE may not know actually about certain things that might be happening at a local level, or maybe it's gone to law enforcement, or maybe it's gone to OCR, but and so I think some of that, hopefully some of those, the recommendations can include around something related to information sharing around that. So.
I want to say for the record that I am so deeply appreciative of Commissioner Hashimoto Martel's work and the opportunity that I had to speak with you and Commissioner Martinez. I was blown away. They called, they had 4 people on, and I got to talk about this case. I feel like between Secretary Tutwiler and you all, I really am so heartened. So I just want to go on the record and say thank you so much. That was very meaningful for me when we spoke.
Quite. Commissioner Lycan, did I skip you? We haven't gotten to you yet.
We haven't yet.
Did you have something?
I do.
Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you. Hi. Listening to your story, when you sit in these conversations, sometimes dots start to connect. And listening to you describe your experience, the bullying that went on, and the isolation that you and your children have felt in various circumstances, brought to mind something I raised in the previous conversation was the isolation that many Jews feel today, and the lack of allyship. And you're sitting in the chair here, and you are someone who has devoted a tremendous amount of energy to building allyship, to break down that kind of isolation that so many of us have been feeling over the last several years. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you've done? I think it's important, and there may be some lessons for the commission in the process.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Likand. So when the massacre happened on October 7th, I have a very dear friend who grew up with me in Brookline. Some of you might know her, Sandy Lish, and we called each other and we said, what are we going to do? I mean, we grieved, and then the next day we said, we rise, right? What are we going to do? I've spent almost all of my career in communities of color in Boston. As I mentioned, I started CWE in Roxbury, very, very purposefully to be there. So I probably had more colleagues in communities of color than I had among white communities, if you will. We said, let's do a roundtable and let's just bare our souls. I couldn't believe I needed to do that. I never thought I would need to share. I had, until that point, I wore my Magen David, but I didn't really talk about any of the discrimination I had faced or my children had faced growing up. I just wasn't comfortable with it. I was always there for others. So she said, well, okay, let's do a roundtable. And I said, no one's going to come. They're afraid to come. They're being told that if they come, they're turning their backs on Palestinians, even though we are both pro-Palestinian, pro-Israel, and anti-Hamas, So I said, I don't know if anybody's going to come. So we sent out to a lot of people we knew, particularly in progressive communities, and about 20 people showed up, which was pretty good. But then what happened is everybody kept calling us and saying, I hear you explained what this new version of anti-Semitism, what I called contemporary anti-Semitism, this sort of like Jews are not indigenous, settler colonialists. So people said, I want to understand that, I don't understand it. I understand the far right, but I don't understand the far left. Can I come? We had 7 roundtables over 8 months. We had major business leaders. We had a presentation from the HR director at Bank of America. We did incredible work. I have all of it captured, all of the best practices around ERGs. Much of it has taken root in the work of many of you, of CJP, JCRC, AJC, and others, and we've worked together. So after that first 7 months, we decided there would need to be a next step. I collaborated with the Redstone Family Foundation. Some of you might know they work on both anti-Black and anti-Semitism with Colette Phillips at Get Connected. And they showed the film called October 8. I think that it would be smart for whatever comes out of this to take that movie and make it shorter and use it for teaching. Because I think fundamentally what I learned is that most people, even though the anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish group was very loud, it was really actually quite small, but it felt large to us. And they were sort of getting people who are in the middle to say, I can't say anything nice about Israel because other people will be mad at me. So I think taking that I found nothing more persuasive than that film, October 8. I ask everybody to see it. I've watched it 4 times myself. In fact, in that film, I followed the money trail. I know someone has talked to you about Rachel Fish, I think, about the money trail and the fact that these efforts on campus have been financed externally and have been long simmering. So thank you for that question. It is all about, as our past speaker said, it's all about allies. I mean, I've actually talked to some of my friends in the Boston business community and the Irish American business community and said, let's go to Israel together. Because for some reason, Ireland is very anti-Israel, and everyone I know in the Irish American community in Boston is like listening to me with open ears and saying, I want to learn more, I want to help, I want to be an ally. So there's all sorts of things that we can do. I know Colette has taken other allies to Israel. Those sorts of things, it's really, we combat this with learning and listening.
Commissioner Burton, did you have a question?
Not so much a question, but just to say thank you. You and I have had many conversations, and you've shared the story of your son and of this young girl, and I watched the video, and no matter how many times I hear you tell this story, it is still shocking to hear. And I just want to share that, having missed the last hearing where we discussed the draft final report, I know a number of my colleagues here have asked me over the last year what my hopes were for this process. And I shared with somebody that, frankly, at some level, I'm okay if we come out of this process with no recommendations, even though, and that I think the draft final report and where we're headed is incredibly impactful, and I'm very enthusiastically looking forward to endorsing the final report next week. But the thing I've said to several of you and to several people in the community over the last year is that if we do nothing else but shine a light on stories like this in the Commonwealth and make it known in public that these things are happening, and just for the interaction, and I thank my fellow commissioner for engaging with this interaction about where the gaps are between an individual parent or a community reporting and trying to take action, and DESE not necessarily knowing about it, and that there's ways to learn from that, then if we do nothing else, then the work of this commission has had a meaningful impact on the experience of the Jewish community and the conversation amongst people who are allies or want to be allies in the Commonwealth. So part of me wishes that some of the people who have been sitting here at every hearing and are not actually here this afternoon had been here to hear this testimony, and I wish that some of the people who have said that this is not a problem that needs addressing were here today to hear this, and I cannot think of a better panelist to conclude our hearings, and I just want to thank the chairs, and to really, Andrea, I know it was hard for you to come and say this in public, even though you told the story to so many people one-on-one, but just thank you again, and just like, nothing is better than ending this process with shining a light on stories like this.
Thank you so much.
All right. Andrea, thank you. I agree with Commissioner Burton. Wonderful way to end this phase of our work. So thank you very much. And please do send it, if you have time to send it this afternoon, send it over this afternoon if you haven't already sent it to Matt.
Yes, I'm going to make a few corrections and send it to you. And I just, again, want to thank you, Chairman Cataldo. I want to thank Chairman Velas. You've been amazing. You've been listening. I've been engaging with you on and off, and all of the other commissioners. It's amazing. I've never seen anything like this, and I've been around the block, around Beacon Hill a few times talking to people, and I've never seen anything like this. And please call on me if I may help in any way.
Thank you. You already have, and I know you will continue to do so. And just for the record, all the commissioners know this, but just for the public, my co-chair and friend is serving our country right now, so that's why he's not here. There couldn't be a better reason. So I'm just going to very briefly, before we adjourn, re-describe the go-forward plan. Mac has and is just waiting for me to take a very last look at the draft that we have now. The draft that we have now includes the hundreds of edits, and I say that in a complimentary way, that have come to the chairs by way of members of the commission and members of the public. We have read every single edit prior to writing this draft. The edits that are there incorporate or don't incorporate intentionally or semi-incorporate everything. So what you received today is the recommendation of the chairs based on all of the input that we've received and that we've discussed. Except that over the weekend, Mac and Anna and I and Chair Velas's team are going to be working on incorporating what we heard today. So on Monday, at some point on Monday, you are going to receive a red line of today's version that's only going to incorporate things from what we heard today. So you can start reading it over the weekend if you wish. Obviously, for some of you, that's a small period of time between now and Monday, taking into account Shabbat. And then you will get another red line with a small number of changes. On next Thursday, we will discuss further motions, including what you get on Monday, the red lines you get on Monday, that would only be done by motion. So only you would decide as a commission through your roll call votes. And we may or may not roll call every single motion for an edit. You'll recall that during our K through 12 day of voting, there were a relatively small number of changes. I'm not trying to prevent you from making the number of changes you want, but what I do just want you to understand is that everything has been looked at, and we have tried to synthesize all of the input to the very best that we can, and we've tried to make intentional decisions. So everyone will have the same number of votes. We will definitely roll call the vote on supporting the commission recommendations and sending that version that we vote on to the clerk. But any further edits, they'll be done in real time. It would be great if you have a laptop to log on to the commission page so that you can see everything better. If you have to leave possibly earlier than we end, if you have an end time that you have to leave, please let Mac know. There may be one or two of us that aren't able to be there at the time of the vote but still want to vote. And so the chairs will devise a method of voting when you're not in the meeting. But if you're here virtually, that just is gonna be like any other meeting. You can vote from your computer, and we'll take it that way. And I think we will I'll make a motion on how we proceed with respect to the absentee voting to make sure everybody agrees that it's both inclusive enough and also not too permissive if there is such a thing. But we will have between the 20th, which is our meeting date, and the 30th, which is the statutory deadline, to send the report to the clerk. With that, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn, or I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn our meeting. Representative Howitt, seconded by Commissioner Hay. Any opposed? We're adjourned.